Hey there, SHIRO listeners, SaturnDave here, reminding you that you must play Sega Saturn, and that it's contributions from listeners like you that help keep this and our other shows hosted and available on demand, in addition to our website, SegaSaturnShiro.com, where you can find all of the most up-to-date news and information from around the Sega Saturn scene. If you'd like to show your support and gain access to several perks, visit patreon.com/SHIRO Media Group to become a Patreon supporter. If a monthly donation isn't possible, no worries. We still value your support in liking and sharing our content on social media and joining our Discord community to become a part of the Saturn conversation. Thank you for being a loyal listener and a part of this great community. And as always,
all right. Hey everybody, welcome to SHIRO Editor's Corner. I'm your host, SaturnDave, and I'm a little under the weather. Not 100%. So you might be wondering,
we'll be above the weather soon enough.
What I'm doing, recording a podcast. I tell you what, instead I have a bunch of bright gentlemen here with me that are going to do most of the talking, and I'll just do the listening. And if I have to cough, I'll mute myself. But it's really nice to see you guys. We've got Dan from the Sega guys. How you doing, Dan?
Yeah, I'm good, Dave. Yeah, glad to be on. Thanks for having me back. It's great to be back with my SHIRO bros on Editor's Corner.
It really is. I miss you, and it's been too long, so I'm really glad that we're finally able to get this done. I'm finally able to get this recording.
It's too long.
I think Mel, we got Mel here too, Sega Lord X, and he reached out to me, I think, initially a couple months ago. So we've done a couple of reschedules, and even though I was a little sick, I decided I did not want to reschedule this time. We're just going to make it happen here. So how are you doing, Mel? Glad to have you on, and it's been, again, too long.
Yeah, I'm doing great, man. It's really good to be back with you guys.
Yeah, you looking good? I've been following you on the Facebook and with your family and stuff. Going to a lot of fancy restaurants, man. I'm jealous.
Oh man, we actually had a James Beard rated restaurant open up here where I'm at, and we checked it out, and good Lord, man, I've never eaten such weird food in my entire life.
James Beard?
You know?
Oh, okay, yeah.
How much weird are we talking here?
Oh, weird, man. I mean, just, it's the first time I've ever had some of this stuff, man. Like, I had $50 caviar, and it was literally a spoonful of caviar. It was 50 bucks.
Look at you.
Dang.
Mr. Don Perignon, your hand and spoon up your nose. Do.
Yeah, it was wild, man. There was sweetbreads and exotic fishes and sauces that I'd never heard of before. I couldn't repeat to you what half that stuff was. But
worthwhile experience.
Yeah, it was pretty, it was unique. It was pretty, I have never tasted anything like any of that. So yeah, it was worth checking out.
Yeah.
It was expensive though. I mean, you don't want to go into that unless you're wanting to spend money.
Right.
Or willing to spend money, I should say.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's worth it for the taste. My girlfriend and I do a lot of the different food and stuff, especially like a lot of the Asian cuisine stuff. There's a big Asian market in Arizona we go to, and we love doing all that, like the foodie stuff. We'll just go there, we'll eat. Like even at the Renaissance Festival, we just ate mostly. We didn't do a lot of the attractions. We did mostly like the just eating and stuff. And
yeah, what do you eat at a Renaissance Festival?
We had giant corn on the cob, like giant like corn on the cob was like really huge. We had like bread bowls. We had some like the pizza that was made in like a brick oven. We had some what else we had? Oh, we had some funnel cake too. It's not really the best, but we just really like food a lot. That's our thing.
Nice.
So.
Yeah.
I'm with Mel on this. I love food.
Yeah, food tourism is a pretty big thing, man, once you get into it. You'll actually travel a country just to experience its food, if it's unique enough. And, I've been all over the U.S. just like, trying out some of the better restaurants. And it's worth doing that just for the experience.
Nice. Well, aside from food, which I think we're all big fans of, we're all also big fans of Sega Saturn. There's
a little bit.
I'm trying to.
It's my worst enemy, to be honest.
Get from there to here. We're all Sega Saturn fans, and we're all hardcore Neo Geo fans too. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to say like who's on top of this list, but I think that we all consider ourselves pretty hardcore Neo Geo fans. Been playing the system for decades now, in some form or another. And
it's all about the journey, you know.
And we all kind of play different ways. I know Pat is all about like the MVS, you know, hardware, and I'm all about the Neo Geo CD because I love those soundtracks and stuff, you know, and I love some of the differences with the Neo Geo CD. And Dan, what's your area of like, how would you normally Neo Geo?
My Neo Geo experience has pretty much always been either vicariously through friends that have owned the system or emulated. Unfortunately, I've never actually owned the Neo Geo hardware.
Like
it was something
Final Burn Alpha or something like that, or how do you emulate Neo Geo?
Final Burn, and what's the one I use now? I do a lot of the Neo Geo stuff through MAME in recent years, but I'm trying to think of the one that I was using recently. But Neo Geo was something, it was always the allure of the Neo Geo for me, and because it was just kind of I've always described I always described the Sega Saturn, you know, in my childhood, it seemed exotic,
right?
And Neo Geo was just kind of an echelon beyond that, to the point, you know, I used to see all the Neo Geo cabs. We had quite a lot of Neo Geo cabs where I grew up. And then I had a friend that had the CD a few years later, and it was always, I really want to play these games. I'd love to play them arcade perfect, because my first exposure was King of the Monsters in my local swimming pool. They had an arcade cab there.
Nice.
And it was just like, then we got the MegaDrive port, which I rented, which was not great. And then King of the Monsters itself hasn't aged particularly well, but still good fun. But you know, it was one of those things where, right, well, I need to play these games somehow. But it was always, Neo Geo was always just out of my reach as far as the hardware is concerned. So it was always, you know, friends that have got a CD system. I never actually knew anyone that had the cart system. And then once it was available, you know, Final Burn, Nebula's another one I use.
Oh, Nebula.
And playing a lot of the games through MAME. That's how I played most of my Neo Geo games. So the topic at hand, really, talking about Neo Geo on the Sega Saturn, as we'll get into, some of these games is like, well, finally, right, I can play these games on hardware that can do these justice after playing some of the, you know, Mega Drive ports that were a little bit of a mixed bag now and again.
Exactly. Okay, well, before we get right into it, what about you, Mel? How do you Neo Geo, or how did you? Don't tell me you had an AES, did you?
No, I did not.
Oh, okay.
You know, growing up, man, it was pretty much, you discovered the Neo Geo in the arcade. And of course, it was like, wow, look at these games. These games look so nice. And then you find out that there is a home console version of that. And it's like, oh my God, I want that so bad. But for the majority of us, that's exactly where it stayed. You know, it's, you wanted it. You know, affording a Neo Geo, even on my end, even being a little bit older, because, you know, I'm in my late teens when the Neo Geo is kind of doing its ramp up, you know, and even though I could save up and I ended up getting, you know, systems like the Super Graphics and the 3DO, and I had to save for those things. Even at that point, I realized that a Neo Geo was still beyond me, because even if I saved up for the console, you're still dropping 150, 200, 250 for each game, which meant that it would take me, even with the hardware saved for, I would have to save for months to get a game. And that turned me off of trying to do it, because I realized I couldn't afford anything else. So the Neo Geo, you know, it was beyond me. And like Dan said, that's what was so incredible about when machines like the Saturn and PlayStation came along, because for the very first time, you actually were able to get affordable, pretty damn close approximations of the arcade game. And you know, that's why I'm here, man. I want to talk about that, because that was awesome. you know, when that started. And, you know, it was everything for the longest time.
I always thought it was really funny. You'd have a kid on like Double Dare who would win like a Neo Geo. What a slap in the face. We'd be like, what good is this? I can't afford any games
it's
to
like
go
great.
Rip.
Because what people don't know is that $200, $150, $200, that's 90s money. That's like equivalent to the $400 and $500 range per game.
Of course, if that kid held on to it, you know, if that kid held on to that AES, now even the hardware is just ridiculous expensive. But
yeah, those games are like small fortunes. Like people have gone to like federal prison for scamming people on Neo Geos and actually killed for it.
Oh,
so,
no kidding, yeah.
the Neo Geo game, especially collectors, do not play games.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I didn't mean to speak for you, Pat, but I did say you do MVS stuff, right? Like, so how do you Neo Geo outside of Saturn?
Outside of Saturn, so basically, I mean, back in the day, you know, arcades, I'd see the MVS and stuff. I actually didn't really know the AES was a thing because, I mean, by the time I was off to play it, it was irrelevant. It's like the 2001, so it was kind of out the window really at that point, really for the vast majority. So like 1, 2 was still expensive as heck. So it's like my mom's not dropping it for me. But most of the stuff was, you know, arcades or going to the nail salon, seeing the classic, you know, loadout Metal Slug 2. Was it maybe Super Dodgeball, Magician Lord, if I'm lucky, and you know the usual suspects like you'd see, and maybe Art of Fighting, like those. Yeah. Those are the three you probably, or the 3 or 4 you'd always sort of see in the Neo Geo loaded up in the 2 or 3 slot or 4 slot or whatever you'd see. Oh, sorry, 2 or 4 slot. So I just got into I really liked the MVS, and I really got into that around 2016, 17. I started picking up the MVS and I made my own super gun to get it going. I mean, now it's a little bit easier with the, you know, the Mr. Core. A lot of people just do that, and a lot of the, you know, the FPGA solutions for that. But that's really how I did it, and I really enjoyed it. I had quite a number. I still have quite a number of games for it, and you know, the deals back then were still pretty decent by that point. Like I got was it Windjammers, Last Resort, and I think Metal Slug 3 for like $300, which was a deal back then, but I think it's probably a little bit more than that, maybe in the $700-800 range nowadays for the loose MVS cards. But really is that just a lot of super guns, and not have an arcade unit. I just put my board in there and play it that way. So it's been really nice to, you know, Neo Geo out that way, and I just love the Neo Geo. Like it feels different. Like I don't know, like it just feels like an experience. Like it feels like you have a hefty thing. Like this is a Cadillac. You're driving, you know, I mean, sports car. Almost.
Not only is the hardware high quality, but like everything they do is very high quality. I would say the games, by and large, are like very high production value, high quality. You know, they really honed their craft with the games. And I think back in the day, it's safe to say that SNK and Neo Geo was kind of like a big competitor, if not main competitor, to Capcom, you know, in the arcades. And that, you know, what was really unique, just for context for folks, probably everybody knows this, but I mean, what was really cool is, as an arcade operator, like the little pizza shop that I would go to, they just had a tiny little alcove, not that big, 1 pinball machine and maybe 2 4-slot Neo Geo machines, right? But with those 2 4-slot machines, you had 8 arcade games right there on the spot, plus a pinball machine. And I mean, they had themselves a little arcade, you know, like full-blown arcade. And so my brother and I would love to go in there and play stuff like Viewpoint or Puzzle Bobble 2, you know, and the fighting games, you know, like Sam Show, you know, and Real Bout, Fatal Fury, that stuff. Like great fighting games. Arguably, maybe not as good as Capcom. I don't know. Some people would debate that they are, but again, it was always like a back.
I see people fight you to the death for Mark of the Wolves and King of Fighters in '98 and 02.
It was like Canon and Nikon, or Apple and Windows. You had SNK and Capcom going at it back and forth, trying to like one up each other, right? So you'd have these fighting games that would just keep turning it up to 11, you know, and just getting crazier and crazier.
Yeah, and the fans for Neo Geo are really more hardcore than Capcom. Like, well, I mean, there is some hardcore fans for Capcom, There are some games in Neo Geo you will get bodied and floored with harder than any Capcom game. Like you find somebody at KOF 98 or O2 or something like that, or somebody that loves Garo, they will take you to Pound Town, like quite literally.
Yeah.
There are hardcore of the hardcore, which is what I really respect about that console.
Yeah.
Is that the fans do not mess around that are into it.
So in the mid 90s, we still didn't have like parity in the home with the arcade. Arcade was still levels beyond, orders of magnitude better than home, living room gaming. But it was getting there, We weren't quite Dreamcast levels of, Dreamcast Naomi. It's almost like 1-to-1, right? But we were getting close, and the Neo Geo ports to the Saturn are a really good argument for, getting really close to, having the same thing in the arcade. Obviously, there would be Saturn Titan video games that Sega would do themselves, but outside, talking third party, that's what we're talking today. It's just Neo Geo ports on the Saturn. And I think instead of going like alphabetical or anything, why don't we just start by talking about Pat, you were talking King of Fighters. Let's talk about the King of Fighters series on the Saturn. We got 3 installments, and they're all a little different, actually. Literally in how they're packaged and what they require to run. And then also the gameplay. So you had King of Fighters 95, King of Fighters 96, and 97. Mel, do you want to introduce us since you are the senior here? I think, and you probably had King of Fighters 95 back in the day. Am I right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay.
Actually, me and my buddy Nathan, man, we imported so much, and we were really excited for that one because you saw in the magazines that it was coming, and they were talking about this cartridge that came with it. And of course, we were like, is it like everything's on the cartridge and the CDs just like the music? Like we were really curious about it at the time. And as that was called like the Twin Advanced ROM system or something. And essentially, it was awesome the way they did it because they were putting assets on a ROM cartridge that would load really fast, and when we got it, let me tell you, it was an absolute nightmare trying to play it because we had switched over to US Saturns after the US launch because we wanted access to all of the games. And of course, by late 95, early 96, the import cartridges had come out that would allow you to play Japanese games on the US system. So we thought we had it all figured out. Well, that backfired on us because, of course, with the Japanese game using a cartridge, you couldn't use the satellite cartridge to play an import game. So what we had to do is we had to boot a game, a US game, jack the US game out of it, put the Japanese disc into it as it loaded. And
the classic swap trick.
Yeah, we swapped it and it worked. But God, man, can you imagine how hard that was
do that every
on
time.
the poor Saturn? Yeah. But yeah, man, we got that as soon as it came out and we were absolutely blown away. You have to understand the context of the time, man. This is the Neo Geo in your home, and outside of a Neo Geo CD at this point, which the Neo Geo CD itself was still expensive. I don't care if it had cheaper games. The Neo Geo CD, to import that bastard at that time, you were still spending $500 for it.
Yeah.
And then you had a lot of the games were coming from Japan because you really had to look for them here in the US. That system did not have a great presence in the US. So importing the games were damn near $100. So, getting this game on our Saturn, it was like, whoa, here this thing is, it's so close. And, it wasn't 100%. It still had its nuances that were different from, of course, the cartridge version. But overall, my friends and I, we were absolutely blown away by it. We were Capcom people. We hardcored the Capcom games, Street Fighter, Darkstalkers, X-Men, Children of the Atom. Those games had hit the Saturn by the time this game hit. But we were still so interested in it because, it was so close to the original Neo Geo version, and we had never had anything like that before. I mean, the closest we got were the Super Nintendo and Genesis ports of certain games, and those games were, you respected them for what that hardware did, but they were nowhere near Neo Geo good. I mean, when it comes right down to it, the first time you put King of Fighters, 95 into a Saturn, that was the closest we had ever been to the Neo Geo in our home. And King of Fighters 95 was, I mean, in my opinion, a good deal better than 94. I mean, it was just, it was still so good looking of a game at the time, too. I know people complain that King of Fighters didn't really evolve fast enough, and year to year it was kind of samey. But, King of Fighters 95, it was still looking great. So it was very comparable to the better 2D games at the time. So getting that at home on your Saturn was just, it was incredible. It was tantamount almost to realizing, holy shit, I finally have arcade perfection at home, and that's what we were so excited about.
Dan, I'm curious, did you ever, you had a Saturn back in the day, you guys got a copy of this, like physical release in PAL territory? Did you pick this up?
In PAL territories? No, I didn't.
Oh,
So
okay.
the story behind this is actually quite interesting. So my history of SNK started with the Commodore 64, Vicari Warriors, which is my favorite game on that system. It's an amazing port, so I loved that game. And then obviously the allure of Fatal Fury on the first of all in the arcades came out at similar times as Street Fighter 2. Obviously, is kind of the real Street Fighter 2 because the team behind it are heads from Street Fighter 2. So, and then we had the MegaDrive port of that, which I rented, which was pretty solid. When it gets to the announcement of King of Fighters 95 on the Sega Saturn, at the time I hadn't seen King of Fighters in the arcade, so I'm going through and I'm looking at the cast. I'm like, oh, hang on a second, that's Terry from Fatal Fury, and that's Ryo from After Fighting. Oh, wait a minute,
Right.
those are the guys from Macari Warriors. I'm like, my mind is blown. So straight away I'm like, I need this game. It's a Neo Geo port. As Mel was saying, the games were so expensive, and I remember seeing, I think it was Fatal Fury 3 they had in a local store, and it was like £300 or £400. So it was a lot. I knew that I was never going to afford them, but like seeing King of Fighters 95, just the screenshots in Sega Saturn magazine, that was like, I need this game. The problem was it took so long to get to market over here. By the time, because I was a teenager, and my friends were, some of them had PlayStations. By the time it came out over here, Japan had already got the King of Fighters 96, and I had friends who had imported the PlayStation version. So from my perspective, I was just like, well, I'm going to import the Saturn version of the sequel rather than get the PAL version of King of Fighters 95. Now, I did get 95 a little later on. I ended up trading in and getting kind of the best collection, which had 95, 96, and 97. But still playing it back then, it was still impressive. Even after we'd had a lot of great Capcom ports, even this close to kind of the 4 MB RAM card coming out and us having X-Men versus Street Fighter, playing King of Fighters 95, even though as a port it was still a couple of years older, it was still enormously impressive. And because of the way that the ROM cart works, it's in some ways it does seem like a closer port than the games that came after. So that was my history with it. I never actually bought the PAL version, which I'm kind of split about. I would have liked it back in the day, and part of me regrets not having it because it would have been cool to have it. Although, as a kid, when you got limited money, you kind of thought like, well, it feels a little redundant that I'm playing this version of the game that came to arcades 2 years ago, was in Japan over a year ago, whereas they've now got the sequel because the PAL version's got the lovely big box and the artwork and everything. But it's a fantastic port. You know, rock hard. I think it's the hardest one out of all the games that came to the Sega Saturn. You know, it's absolutely brutal in difficulty. But
I would
it
have
really
to agree.
did. Yeah,
It is really
it really
difficult.
did. Yeah, it really did show the show what the Sega Saturn could be capable of, especially with the expanded RAM or the ROM card in that case.
Fun fact: my copy came from Mel here. It was one of the random games that he sent me, probably a duplicate, you know. But that's cool. I mean, I wouldn't own it if it wasn't for you, Mel. Because it is one of those ones I was always kind of curious about. I'll get around to getting this one day, and then in comes a packet from Mel and with a copy of the game. So, yeah, no, I did, and I tried it out with the cart and everything. And yeah, it is really hard, a lot harder than I remember.
Yeah, the Neo Geo boss syndrome is real.
I think it's just it was the first of the King of Fighters series, right? And then they kind of refined it.
No, 94 was.
Not 90. Yeah, no, you're right. 94 was 95. 95 was like an impressive sequel. That's what it was. But with 96 and 97, they, you know, kept kind of honing it and kind of balancing it a little bit. And I felt like I'm a lot better at 97 than I am at 95, you know. What about you, Pat? Specifically with 95, any thoughts before we move on to like the differences with like 96 and 97?
So 95, I didn't really get to play too much because one of the number one, I really wasn't in any in the Neo Geo machines. Weirdly enough, every Neo Geo machine in public I've seen never had a King of Fighters in it. It sounds weird, but you have to keep in mind that like these are like the places I've seen them are mostly like, you know, nail salons, all these other ones, and it was always Fatal Fury, Art of Fighting, or you know, Metal Slug 2. Only two for some reason. Only two. I don't know why it's only ever been two. It's only two.
I'll just say that was the same as my experience as well. I never saw a King of Fighters game in an arcade until 98. It was always, like you were saying, Pat, Metal Slug 2 and Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting were the ones that we saw in the arcades.
I'm glad across the sea it's the same sort of syndrome. I guess that's the built-in ones they get because it's like they're probably the cheapest ones. If I had to gander a guess on that, but like I said, I was saying I didn't really play it much, and the fact that I needed a cart for it was also an issue because I couldn't play it on my Saturn. On top of that, because I used the pseudo Saturn or the pseudo Saturn cart, so it was a double L for me. So I didn't really get to play it much. I did play it in retrospect a few years later on like the Mister and stuff like that, and I guess it's okay. The thing is that with the Neo Geo games, I usually only play the ones that are like, you know, the best King of Fighter ones. So it's either for Saturn, it's like I play 97, or for the Neo Geo, it's 98 or 02. And it's like the other ones, while they're good, it's just like it feels like it's a weird jank version between it. It's kind of like playing instead of playing third strike, you're playing a Second Impact or something of Street Fighter 3. You're not gonna really focus on those ones. You're really gonna play the ones that are the creme de la creme. Per se,
right?
But what I've seen on it, looks pretty solid. It's not, you know, the worst in the world. It definitely looks solid on the Saturn compared to the 95 on the Neo Geo.
I'm trying to remember if somebody had like made a patched version where you didn't have to use the cart. I can't remember.
There's a patch version so you can use the RAM cart. Instead of, see, if you get a patch version, you can just use the 1 megabyte and 4 megabyte RAM cart. So you load it into your ODE.
And is there like the ISO image has that extra data that would be on the ROM cart that it would have to like write to the RAM cart?
I'm not sure how. And imagine that's what it's doing.
See, I remember. I remembered that was a thing. So yeah, it used to be that folks, if you didn't have the ROM cart, you just couldn't play this game, you know. But like Pat said, you know, if you have Mister, you could do it that way. You can emulate, and then now, somebody's created like a patch of this game so that you can, if you have a RAM cart. I
think the Saru actually has it built in too. Like for the Saru,
I think the Saru, wouldn't that just work the same way as having a RAM cart though?
It basically just loads in the 3 because it is the 3 ones. Is the Mega Man one, or sorry, the Ultraman one,
right?
At King of Fighters 97 or 95, and I forgot what the third one was.
the ROM cart games. Ultraman and
I forgot whatever the third one is. It's probably nothing that important.
Yeah,
actually, I think there are just two. There's
only those two.
I think it's just those two.
Yeah, just the two.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think that's what it is. But anyway, okay. So before we move on, let's talk about 96 and 97. How were they different? Were they as good? Did they live up to 95? And who wants to start off? Just raise a hand. I guess
I'll go.
Go.
Fight it out. Go, Pat.
Go on, Pat.
Fight out. I guess I'll just say that let's be really quick about it. I think 97 was the first one I played on Saturn. It's really good compared to the Neo Geo version of it. I really enjoy it a lot. It's really fun. It's probably one of my if I can't play 98 or 02, that's usually my go-to is King of Fighters 97. It's a really solid game.
Mm-hmm.
It's like pretty much 95% of King of Fighters 98. So it's good enough for me. It has a bunch of characters in it. It's the fun game mode. I really enjoy it, and the moveset's pretty much parallel, so I don't really have to do any reconfigurations of stuff as much. Just some bounce changes, but really solid title. I would recommend people if they want to play a really good Neo Geo, if they really want the King of Fighters experience, definitely play 97 on Saturn.
How does it perform compared to real hardware?
Besides the loading times, it's pretty decent. It's mostly loading times. I can't notice too much different, but like I said, I don't. I never did like a back to back of it, to be honest with you.
So it's close enough that you don't notice the difference. If you're not playing
there's probably something like some frame stuff right there and loading times, of course, but like besides that, it's nothing that's nuts that I came across. But my memory of 97 might be fuzzy though. So.
So 96 and 97 are both RAM cart required games, right? 96 being the 1 megabyte RAM cart required, I think, right? And then 97 you could use either. Is it 97 you could use the 1 or the 4?
Yeah, 97's, but because 96, if you put the 4 megabyte RAM cart in there, and it's the same for a lot of the 1 megabyte RAM cart games,
right? You
get a lot of artifacting and glitches. When I was doing my SNK on SHIRO video recently, I actually ran across a couple of those in 96 and in Real Bout. So you could play the game, but it would occasionally look absolutely awful with a bunch of like weird glitches and stuff.
Oh, because the SHIRO actually just defaults to 4 megabytes, right?
It's kind of, so it works differently depending what cart you've got, because I had the same issue. It's quite funny because the SHIRO, I had it on Real Bout, and then I didn't have the issue again after I power cycled it. But then when I was doing the Fenrir with my Action Replay Plus, which is, again, it's 1 megabyte, 4 megabyte, and I think it switches depending on the game in question, I had the issue with King of Fighters 96. Now, I don't know what causes it. It's just kind of this, I think it has functionality for both built in, and it will switch depending on the game, but occasionally it will load the wrong thing in, or you start using 4 megabyte for the game when it's kind of not supported.
I have a side note for that. So, some folks get carts where there's an actual bank switch that you can change between 1 and 4, right? The ones that just say that they're 1 and 4, I think it's more marketing than anything. I think it's just 4, and what they're doing is just banking on the fact that you're going to be, most of the Saturn games that require 1 will work with the 4, but there are those few games that are just broken if you try to use the 4, like 96 King of Fighters 96, for example, is one example where the game will kind of corrupt if you try to use the 4 meg. And so I know with a lot of Action Replay Pluses, at least mine, I can raise my hand for myself. It says on the box 1 and 4 megabyte, but really it's just 4 megabytes, and they're hoping you don't ever stumble across a game that's gonna break, because that's the thing.
There's a weird one.
Those early days where they just put out the 1 megabyte cart, they really designed those games just for that 1 megabyte cart, and so they didn't work too well once they put out the 4 meg cart, right? Mel, you're nodding your head, so you agree?
Oh yeah, it was like that. The first Real Bout Fatal Fury, I think, is another one that won't work with the with the 4 megabyte cart.
Right.
those games, they targeted that 1 megabyte cart specifically. There was something about the technology of the 1 megabyte and the 4 megabyte. I think SNK was involved more with the creation of the 1 megabyte cart, and Capcom was involved more with the creation of the 4 megabyte cart.
Oh, right.
And I think that had something to do with it, because you notice, you go back, none of the Capcom games really had to have none that I can think of absolutely required it. Like, weren't most of the 1 megabyte Capcom games optional?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, but you notice that a lot of the SNK games had to have it. You didn't run into Capcom Saturn ports that needed the RAM cart until the 4 megabyte RAM cartridge.
Right, yeah.
So I mean, there was a difference there, and when those games kind of got caught in between the release of that 1 megabyte and that 4 megabyte, they didn't work correctly. And we ran into that problem back then really badly too, because with the eventually the the cartridge would come out that had the 1 megabyte 4 megabyte support, but that cartridge never seemed to work with the 1 megabyte games that had problems with 4 megabyte carts. They were always screwed up. So if you didn't have the actual authentic cartridges, at the time, you were running into that problem with this handful of games. And like I said, I'm pretty sure my friends and I ran into it with the first real bout on the Saturn. It did the same damn thing with the screwed up sprites and whatnot.
Yeah, no, it's there's also another funny glitch that happens on the action replay. If you use the action replay cart and you leave it on 97 a couple games, and you leave it like on a pause screen or just leave it idle for a little bit and come back, it'll like corrupt the game completely. It's really funny when that happens, but it happens if you just leave it alone. I don't know exactly what happens. Maybe there's some
interesting
RAM addressing malfunction, but yeah, it's the same thing. Just corrupts.
Yeah.
It's really
flush
funny
it and start again, I guess. Interesting. Yep. So 96, better game than 95 on the Saturn?
Absolutely.
Yep,
absolutely.
Definitely.
How so?
Well, I mean, I'll just say this, it was really, in my opinion, 96, 97 were the changes made that were kind of the run up to 98 that made 98 so good. In 96, they added stuff. They added like a run. They added the roll. They added the desperation. I mean, they were tweaking and adding things to that game that were finally, taking it to a level where you were like, wow, these games are getting really, effing good. And, they tweaked it further in 97, where they're just kind of honing it in. This is what we want this series to be. And then bam, in 98,
right.
Of course, it was like, holy hell, man, like King of Fighters hit the stride. It was really good. And that's what was so nice about 96, 97, because you kind of saw those pieces coming together, forming what King of Fighters was becoming. And I still love going back to them every now and then, because you can really see the building blocks of what that series was in those two games.
If folks want to play King of Fighters on their Saturn, should they go just straight to 97, you think? Or
no, I think they need to play them all. So my view is that they have all got their own vibe, and the thing is, kind of unlike Street Fighter, which every game is kind of self-contained, the King of Fighters game, and the Saturn is kind of fortunate because it has 95, 96, and 97, which all form part of the Orochi saga.
Yes.
94 was its own kind of standalone thing, whereas 95, 96, and 97, you had the story thread going through. So you play them all, and you do get you get a narrative that goes through all three games. It's not just the fighting game. It's not just that they're awesome fighting games. It's that there's a reason to play through them all. But they're all got their own different vibe,
What is it?
95.
Yeah, what is that vibe?
It's kind of different for all of them. 96 is probably my favorite. probably not because mechanically it's the best. As Mel was saying, they honed it, and 97 is probably the best playing. And I think the fact that 97 is the best playing is kind of reflected in how that game is viewed in certain parts of the world. Like, it's one of the biggest selling arcade arcade games of all, or highest grossing arcade games of all time. I think it's got a very big following in Latin America. But 96,
oh, it definitely does.
Yeah,
96. Obviously, Mugen didn't exist then, but 96 almost feels like a fan dream game to me. And it was seeing that before 95 came out that just made me think, I don't need 95, I'll just go 96. I'll save my money for 96, because the soundtrack to it is absolutely phenomenal. It takes it from, various different other SNK games. You've got like the Boss Team, and then they've got like Geese Howard's music, and you've got Wolfgang Krause's music, and you've got the Red Book Audio arranged soundtrack versions of those on the Sega Saturn. It just sounds absolutely phenomenal. It's probably the least balanced out of all of them, which is why I think a lot of people overlook it. And I think a few people at the time were disappointed by it, because it was arguably, in terms of balance, would be a little bit of a step back from 95. But for me, it's one of the ones that's got the most fan service and the most fun. As I say, 95 is probably more kind of traditional SNK fighting game in terms of its vibe. 97, meanwhile, you've got these fan favorite soundtracks all arranged in 96, but 97 really goes into this ambient feel. And it's like, it's all presented as if it's being covered on TV. You've got the Sattler news network, and you've got all these cameras, and you've got all these newsreels in between stages, which is really cool. And it gives you this feeling, talking about kind of just the vibe of the game here. As you play through, it gives you this feeling that you're actually kind of boots on the ground, either watching this on telly or it's a real thing. So you've got stages where there's no real music at all. There's people cheering, or there's like a chant going on in the background. So again, it feels different. And then obviously you get to the final couple of stages where it kind of ramps up into kind of normal SNK fighting game with tough bosses and awesome soundtracks. So
and all that stuff amounts to extra megs too, which is something they did back then. It's like every successive issue, it would be more megs, Yaku Mega Shock, and then before you know, it's like 500 megs, and of course they keep adding megs to Mai Shiranui's assets, and the characters, the sprite
it's
work.
Like 700. I think actually it's 700 and something.
I'm not sure if Mai Shiranui looks any more detailed in 97 than she does in 95. It's a short span, but I know that it does change. The sprite work gets more and more detailed as they added more megs.
It gets more bouncy.
Exactly. More frames of animation to enjoy. But yeah, so okay, cool. So you think that folks should just try them all, maybe in order, so they can just appreciate remind me, what is the Orochi Saga? I was familiar with that at one point. That was the story arc that lasted for however many games, up through what, 99?
Yeah, it was just 95, 96, 97. So it starts with obviously 94 is kind of stands alone. You got Rugal as a boss. In 95 it's Omega Rugal, and the story is he's tapped into this power. You defeat him, and then in 96 it turns out that this tournament's hosted by Ginitz, who took the other part of the power. He's the one that took Rugal's eye, and then it all comes down to the fact that they're trying to bring back this kind of demigod kind of guy called Orochi, who you fight at the end of 97. So it all ties in there, and you've got obviously it ties in with how Kyo and Yori and Shizuru, who's introduced in 96, kind of how all that they all tie together. And the benefit is in 96, I think you can get a lot of the dialogue in English, which helps a lot. Unfortunately, you don't get that in 97. But yeah, another reason why I do have a real soft spot for 96, especially when you get like you edit, so you've got kind of the narrative hero team rather than kind of the default ones. But yeah, that's kind of why I'd think that you'd need to play all of them kind of in sequence. And obviously you see the evolution of gameplay then, and how they fine-tuned it and honed it and got it closer to what we see in 98, which, while it's a standalone kind of greatest hit sort of game, it's definitely the best in my opinion.
Unfortunately, we never did get us outside of like the standard backup, the backup memory save cart in the States. We never got any other official cart, for none of the memory RAM carts would come over to the West. And so you really did have to import, these Japanese games and the RAM cart, in order to enjoy them. And of course, subsequently, Action Replay can do the trick and stuff. So as far as like eating good back in the day, Mel, it was the closest thing. Like you would say that it was, you were happy, you were set with this, like versus trying to get it on AES or, get an MVS in the home. This did the job.
The only thing I would criticize the Saturn ports, and this actually happened with a few of the Saturn ports, they really concentrated on making the animation as close as it could, and it seemed they sacrificed the sound effects. I've noticed that if you ever play, like, try it the next time it's convenient for you, but play the Neo Geo original. I'm talking the AES MVS. Play the original and then immediately fire up the Saturn version. Man, those Saturn sound effects sound like they are way lower quality. I mean, it's not to the point where you're like, throw your hands up, oh my God, this is absolute garbage. But it's one of those things that if you actually, if you hit it back to back, it's like, wow, it sounds clearer. It sounds higher quality on the original game. It's almost like they lowered the quality of the samples on the Saturn so that more would fit into memory, which, as you know, with a CD-based system, that was always going to be an issue at that time. Even the Neo Geo CD, which a lot of the games that we're going to talk about tonight and right now, most of these Saturn ports were based off of Neo Geo CD games. And so the Neo Geo CD had way more RAM to work with than the Saturn did. And even there, those ports needed to be cut back some in various areas. And I think that's where they hit it the hardest on the Saturn, is they messed with the sound effects. It was kind of like they were balancing. It was like, let's give it these new soundtracks, but these sound effects, we can lower the quality a little bit. And I think that's the biggest difference I found. But at the time, man, I didn't give two rats' asses about the fucking, excuse my language, but okay. I didn't give a damn. I didn't give a damn about the sound effects. It was all about the animation and graphics. Right. And in my opinion, these games were really close to the originals.
It's fun cutting down on that aspect. Yeah. Honestly, I wonder how much of it is just them trying to, maybe they weren't given the assets and had to work with lower samples or had to capture it from an arcade machine itself. I don't know. I just wish I was a fly on the wall for the development. There's a lot of stuff, but it's really weird that the sound effects specifically took a hit on that, when it's like you'd expect it to be better for the Saturn.
It could be case by case leverage. It could be case by case, because I think I remember Metal Slug sounding just as good or better on the Saturn. If anything, that
it just runs higher. It's not as good.
Right. Yeah. But we'll get to that for sure. I just want to mention one more thing, is that, with some fighting games, not necessarily Neo Geo games, but like, let's say Mortal Kombat 2, on the Saturn, there were real problems with loading, from the disc. And I'm just curious, like, did that plague these games? Or it was pretty much just like the Neo Geo CD where everything loads in and then you're good to go. Was loading really an issue for playing these games?
I didn't.
If you had a good CD.
Not if you had to get, but
a good CD drive.
In terms of like, you load to pick the player, then you load the match, then you win, and then does it have to load again? Like, the overall experience is a lot better, I would say, than the Neo Geo CD in some cases, right? With the Saturn, is where I'm getting.
I would say it would.
Yeah, so. In some cases, of course, the Neo Geo CD is real hardware, but, and Mel said, a lot more RAM, but you have to like fill it from the disc. That's like a really slow faucet. So yeah, in some cases, maybe the Saturn version isn't exactly 1-to-1 with the real hardware, but it makes up for it in in quicker load times, and just overall experience is really good. So I think I
definitely play a lot of these games. Definitely play those games on CD on Saturn rather than CD on Neo Geo CD.
Yeah,
for sure with that drive.
Yeah,
those load times on the CD were ridiculous.
They really are.
I love the Neo Geo CD. Don't get me wrong. I'm not hating on it, but good Lord, man, that first, those first couple of models, trying to play some of the larger games on it, what it was terrifying, man, because you'd start the game up, you'd get the load, you'd get the intro from the arcade, it would load, you would start the game, it would load, you'd beat around, and then it was like, oh, the win quote needed to load.
Right. I mean, even the CDZ, like with the later games, forget it. Like try playing Last Blade 2 on the CDZ. Forget it, because it's just
get the Dreamcast copy of that.
Right, point. Exactly. Okay, so we can all endorse King of Fighters then. 95, 96, 97, definitely go check it out. Best of Neo Geo on Sega Saturn. Moving right along, we're going to cover another 3 games in the Fatal Fury series. We're going to talk Fatal Fury 3, Real Bout Fatal Fury, and Real Bout Fatal Fury Special. Are those is that in the correct order? Did I get that order correct? Okay.
Yep.
Who wants to kick this one off? Who's the big Fatal Fury fan? Who's in the house? Nobody?
Oh man, I hated the Fatal Fury games for the longest time.
Okay.
Fatal Fury 1, Fatal Fury 2, then there, Special and 3, and I didn't really appreciate any of those games. I didn't like I didn't find a good Fatal Fury game, in my opinion, until Real Bout came out. And the first time I played Real Bout was on the Saturn. And of course, I had known that it was a Neo Geo game, but I hadn't really played it, in depth. And I discovered it on the Saturn. I really enjoyed the Saturn, Real Bout Fatal Fury games. The first one and Special, I thought were 2 really good, nice playing games with a lot of depth. They looked outstanding on the Saturn.
Can I just ask you before you go any further, like why, so I understand the context, why did you not like Fatal Fury though, to begin with? Like what was it about it?
There was a lot of things. I hated the way the lanes were in the earlier games where you could it's just like, if you put it on the harder settings when you really want a challenge, that's all the damn AI will do. It'll just keep changing lanes. If you want to get good, you have to learn how to change lanes. I hated that style of gameplay. It was almost like you could run from your opponent constantly. And I hated that. It made the gameplay frustrating to learn. And of course, the games are difficult. Neo Geo difficulty is no joke. That's a real thing. When you're learning,
they will kick your ass.
Absolutely. Exactly. When you're learning a Neo Geo game, it's not like a Capcom game where you can just throw it down on 1 star and just pulverize the computer. Even on the easier settings, once you get 2, 3 characters deep into a Neo Geo fighting game and that difficulty starts kicking in, it's still a difficult game. That's the reason why Neo Geo hardcores are so freaking good, because they were born and bred as fighting game, fanatics through that difficulty. And I think Pat was right. You play a dedicated Neo Geo fan, they tend to be some of the more vicious of the people that are whoop your ass. Yeah. And I don't know. I never got into Fatal Fury because they were all, it never struck me as a game that was as good as the other types of games that were out at the time. I just didn't appreciate, the mechanics of it. And I didn't really feel that those mechanics really came together and started to be something good until Real Bout.
Real Bout. Okay.
And then, when I played both of those on the Saturn, I thought both of those were excellent conversions to the Saturn too. I think both of those are based on the Neo Geo CD versions too. They both use the RAM cartridge, so Yeah, I mean, as far as conversions go, I was happy with both of those.
Yeah, I will say Real Bout, look, it's a huge increase in just like visuals, and just like the color palette, and just everything looks so much more polished than the previous games. And I guess that just speaks to the fact that the original Fatal Fury games were just kind of more of that older, like SNK fighters style than like the newer style. If anything, Real Bout was like catching up to some of the other stuff that was going on, you know.
Yeah, it kind of looked like a Street Fighter Alpha game,
yes,
in a way.
Yeah,
it had that similar, that similar change there where it looked more anime-ish.
But they must have known that they must have caught on to folks like you not really jiving with the original series, because they had to change it up, you know. And I agree with you. It isn't really. I don't really go back to any of the Fatal Fury games except for the Real Bout ones. I'm just curious, Dan. You raised your hand too. You had some stuff to say about these three. Or just
I love the Real Bout games. So I did enjoy the arcade version of the original game, and then I don't mind the Genesis or Mega Drive port. I think the Mega Drive port of Fatal Fury 2, despite the kind of the cutbacks, and maybe because it obviously the Mega Drive, it can't do the sprite scaling, so it doesn't have the lane system, so it plays more like a traditional fighter. So 2 on the Mega Drive is a pretty decent game. I quite enjoyed that when I rented that back in the day. I think the problem is when you get to 3, then it starts getting overly gimmicky, because 3 increases the number of lanes. You've got 3 lanes instead of 2. So I was expecting that to be your reaction, Mel. So it just becomes, and the problem with 3 is, and I didn't play 3 until later, but the Sega Saturn port is not good. It's not handled by SNK. I think the other games are handled by, well, the King of Fighters games and later Real Bout games are all handled by SNK in-house. Whereas 3, I can't remember who it was that ported it to the Sega Saturn.
It was Sims.
Oh, Sims. Oh, well, there you go.
That's surprising, because normally they do great work on the Sega Saturn, but it's a very.
They can only polish a turd so much, Dan.
Yeah, I don't think those frame drops exist on the Neo Geo originals, though. I think it's just the Sega Saturn version. It just feels choppy and sluggish, and I know it's probably just a straight port of the Neo Geo CD, because it is, like you were saying, you load the game, you get a loading screen. You press start the title screen, you get a loading screen. You go to the character select.
Does it require a RAM card, the 1 meg? Or
no, so Fatal Fury 3 doesn't.
So maybe that's it. Maybe it just, they really needed that, and without it, you get the frame drops. Interesting.
It wouldn't surprise me that they didn't have the experience to do that, because they probably didn't work with that, with the SNK thing, especially having like thrown this onto them. It's like, well, we don't know how to do that, so we're not going to spend all this money. We're just going to do what we get paid to do and put this game out, which is evident in playing the game that you see. That's the vibe.
Could be a timeline thing too. I'm not sure if that came before KOF 95, but maybe they just hadn't gotten there yet with the carts. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it wouldn't be surprising if they just got this thrown onto them, because Fatal Fury 3 probably bombed, and they're like, whatever, we want to port this, but we don't want to spend the time to take away from the team, so let's just give it to third party, have them do it, and of course,
So with all of the amazing fighters on the Saturn, which there are so many, are any of these essential, required reading? 3, Real Bout or Real Bout Special? Would you say that?
I would say maybe Real Bouts.
Just the original Real Bout, that folks should definitely check that out.
Yeah, Real Bout, I think they were like, let's get rid of these gimmick stuff, and it actually is a pretty competent fighting game. It's still not one of my favorite ones. I'm not a fan of the Fatal Fury series. I prefer Art of Fighting way over it. I don't know. It's funny. I prefer the Fatal Fury story, but I prefer the Art of Fighting game, which is kind of weird to think about. And unfortunately, to get the experience of Fatal Fury, I have to play the most gimmicky game I've ever played. Like, I played some fighting games with gimmicks, but man, that game is way too much for me. Like, I much prefer Art of Fighting. Like, I could beat Art of Fighting 1 easily, but like Fatal Fury is just no thank you. I'm on a diet from wherever that is.
Unfortunately, we didn't get Art of Fighting on the Saturn. No, but
fortunately.
But anyway, I didn't mean to rain on your parade. But
no, it's all good. It's all good. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. So before we move, I mean, funny. So Fatal Fury still, it was kind of a flagship or an earlier flagship series for SNK before King of Fighters just kind of knocked it out of the park. But so Dan, before we leave, Fatal Fury, anything you want to say? Just last words on these three games.
Yeah, so when you were saying, well, are they worth playing, I'd definitely say, I think Real Bout is definitely up there with the best 2D fighting games on the system. Fatal Fury 3, just I don't think anyone needs to pick that up. It's not a great arcade game, and it's not a good port.
Right. Okay.
Real Bout games are really good, excellent games. Up there kind of with, I wouldn't say quite Alpha 2 level, maybe kind of Alpha 1 level in terms of kind of gameplay and execution. And I think the good thing about Real Bout, and I think SNK knew they were doing, because the first Real Bout brings back Geese Howard, so it's almost a reboot. It's kind of like, okay, let's forget those previous three games, because obviously they weren't commercially as successful as other fighting games at the time. It's almost like a reboot, and Special brings back Krauser, and you can almost, similar to King of Fighters, you can see the evolution and plot the dotted line to kind of the pinnacle of the series, which, again, similar to King of Fighters, where that ends up with 98, Real Bout ends up with Garou Mark of the Wolves, both of those kind of Dreamcast,
which is an excellent game.
Yeah, but obviously we've got the new Garou coming out.
So what makes Special? What makes Real Bout Fatal Fury special, different, or special? Do you guys know?
It's effectively a sequel more than kind of a special edition.
Okay. So the name is a little misleading then.
It is a little bit, because it's got a different final boss. It's got additional characters, and the gameplay system is quite evolved from what we had back in the original Real Bout. So it's definitely a substantial upgrade rather than kind of it's a special edition. It's meant to bring to mind kind of the jump between Fatal Fury 2 and Fatal Fury Special, which that retained a lot of the same narrative, the same boss characters, same boss types, and added a few more. But Real Bout Special does feel like kind of the Real Bout 2 before the actual Real Bout 2, and the Real Bout 2, as far as I remember, that didn't get a Sega Saturn port. I don't think it even got a Dreamcast port, and I think that was kind of SNK kind of around bankruptcy time. It feels a little bit unfinished by comparison.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think it even has like a full story mode. It's mostly competitive from memory. But yeah, Real Bout Special is, again, they're games that complement each other, especially narratively wise.
Yeah.
The only thing I didn't like about Special is they took away the ring outs, man. I thought that was one of the coolest things about the first Real Bout, was you could, it was almost kind of like a miniature fatality in a way, like knock your guy out of the ring. And, they took that away in Special, but, in a lot of ways, Special is definitely the better game, because, they updated the visuals, they added new stages and whatnot to it. I mean, the only thing that I don't like about, or the only other thing that I kind of didn't like so much is, it brought back the 2-lane fighting system.
Oh, really?
But it wasn't quite as gimmicky as it was in the previous games, and it was nowhere near as bad as it was in 3. So I mean, like Dan said, it's sort of like that. That sidestep where they kind of just added a few things to it, took a couple things away, but I mean, it doesn't really matter which one you play. I think they're both really solid games.
Cool. And they both perform, you say, like up to snuff with like the King of Fighters stuff.
Oh yeah.
Good performance. How did they do on Saru, by the way, Dan?
Yeah, on Saru, massive improvements for both of them. The load times were pretty much instant. I think if it didn't have to load, because the thing is when you're playing, I've got where I had disc, I've got these games on disc, so I was doing Saru, Fenrir, and on disc. And the thing I've noticed about playing them on disc is when it's loading the games, you think, right, well, you finish, you load it, you start the next fight and it's just loading the next fight. But what you notice is that the disk access is loading the loading screen and then loading the next fight, and it's loading that loading screen to be. If it didn't have to load the loading screen in between, I'm pretty sure that it'd be almost instant on Saru.
Mhm.
You know, noticed it a bit with kind of World Heroes Perfect, which doesn't have a loading screen, which we might get into later. But yeah,
Mhm.
it just makes them so much more pleasant to play with Saru, and a lot of these games are. Most of the SNK games that I tried in Saru were just night and day in terms of light load times.
Yeah, so that's these games are a good use case for the Saru, I guess. I still
Yeah,
need to try
absolutely.
that, but after watching your video you did, which was a great video, it makes me like, okay, now I know what the first thing I'm gonna put on this Saru is.
Yeah, I think I said in that. I think me and James are always. We talk Saru's benefits and say, choose the ODE that's right for you, and this is kind of a good entry level one.
Mhm.
If you want to play SNK
If
games,
you,
I go as far to say is it's pretty much essential
it's
because it
true.
just transforms a lot of these.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, even some of the Capcom stuff, it's like you're playing it like, wow, that felt like it was an arcade cab, just like
Yeah.
loading up instantly. Yeah. Okay. So we'll talk three more like major in a major series is the Samurai Showdown series. You had Samurai Showdown 3, you had 4, and then you had RPG, which what technically isn't a fighting game, but it is a part of the Samurai Showdown series. So figure we'll mention it here. We'll start with 3. First of all, anybody love the Samurai Showdown games? I
Oh
will
yeah.
say, yeah, these used to be in like the Godfather's Pizza. They were in the Marie Calendar. The Samurai Showdown was huge when it came out. It really was. Like it. Would you guys say that it was kind of almost as big as like Mortal Kombat? Like it was really big in my town, at least. In a lot of the arcades, Samurai Showdown was just kind of when it first came out. Now, of course, a bunch of other stuff came along and kind of made folks forget, but it was like a really popular series, at least where I
I mean,
grew up.
everyone still loves it. They even had a new one that came out a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
guess it's a few years ago now. It came out like I think in like 18 or 19 or something.
Just that intro with the cherry blossoms and then the like lanterns getting chopped in half with the katana and everything, like
Yeah.
the artwork, because that's all sprite work. And that was the thing that was so amazing about Neo Geo was that you can have like these animated cutscenes, but that are all done via like large full screen sprites, it's just amazing.
And and especially the scaling of it's just so beautiful with all the sprites. Like, I don't know, from even the first game, the mechanics were really nice.
Mhm.
From the first Sam show to like the last one, are really, for the most part, really nice.
And I mean, Samurai Showdown. It's one that folks will often say, "Oh, well, the Samurai Showdown on the 3DO is pretty good," or what. I'm just curious. Like, I'm not an expert about how these games run on Saturn. So if anybody is, definitely speak up. How does Samurai Showdown fare on Saturn? Mel?
I mean, I thought it ran, fine. Samurai Showdown 3 is an interesting game anyway because it changed Samurai Showdown in so many ways,
Mm.
The you had Samurai Showdown 1, which was for me and my friends, it was really one of the few arcade fighters that gave Street Fighter 2 a run for its money and fun factor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it looked incredible, it sounded incredible, and that gameplay was nasty. There was nothing quite like, your buddy, trying to run, into you with a combo and you countered it, and you took 3/4 of his life with those sound effects just pounding, with the slices. It had a certain, grittiness to it, a certain, bloodiness to it, if you will, that the Capcom games didn't have. And when Samurai Showdown 3 came out, they darken the entire game. They give it that demon storyline.
Right.
They, you know, give you the slash and the bust, which changed up some of the moves for the characters. And you know, I don't know, it changed, you know, at the core in a lot of ways where the series was going, because those changes would, you know, go into the next game as well, and they were sort of, you know, honed even further. And I prefer Samurai Showdown 4 over 3, but I think both of these games are good. I think 3 kind of gets hated on sometimes as like the weaker Samurai Showdown. I liked it. I thought it was a really good game, and I thought they both played and ran nice on the Saturn, you know, for what they were. You know, the load times weren't overly intrusive. You know, I, I don't know. I can't really say anything to, you know, disparage either one of them.
Dan or Pat, any comments on?
I never really played it much, so I can't really speak on that. From what I've seen of it, it's not too different from my side. I'm not really the biggest Sam Show fan. I haven't really played the Saturn ones besides maybe loading up Saturn RPG, to be honest.
Gotcha. And Dan?
Yeah, just I think Mel hit the nail on the head with the way that they changed the vibe and the gameplay there. I think for me, I never was as into Sam Show, you know, back in the day. It's one I got into a little bit later. And I think the reason why is because it just plays quite differently.
Yes.
Because if you go in thinking that you can rush people with a bunch of combos like you're in kind of King of Fighters or Street Fighter, then you can get punished, and you can get punished hard in those games.
Right.
They are brutal. So it wasn't one that I gelled with as that well, so I didn't play these games back in the day, which is a shame because I'd love to pick, you know, I'd have loved to have copies of both of these. But yes, Sam Show 3 really has that kind of dark vibe to it. And this kind of comes back to what I was saying about King of Fighters games having their own vibes and atmospheres. Both of these games have really kind of cool atmospheres and quite distinctive ones. What's quite interesting is I think both of these were actually planned to be, they plan to have 2 sequels. I think the story carries through both games in these, and I may be wrong in thinking this, but don't they come now, like in terms of timeline, aren't they between 1 and 2 rather than being?
The timeline is it's not sequential like you would think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They are great, and I think they play really well on Saturn as well. You know, the load times, I think the load times I found were worse on 3. 4 does like a bigger load at the start, and then kind of you get smaller chunks as you go through the arcade mode. But once you're there, they play really well, and you just got to spend the time to kind of understand the nuance of both of them, I think, and get used to them, because they may look like the usual 2D fighter. Just you think, oh, it's just Street Fighter with swords, right? But
it's like a weapons-based fighter, yeah. But yeah, it's pretty different. And you're right, it is more slow and plodding, like with the big slashes and stuff like that. The timing is everything. Whereas you can't just like rush and do those huge combos. Yeah, it's quite a different series, and maybe not for everyone. But yeah, so
and
oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it was also Samurai Showdown 3 had a really big learning curve too, because not only did you have like the slash and the bust, which would change up the characters a little bit, but you know, you also had, I mean, what they called grades. So you had the beginner grade, the normal grade, and the expert grade. And that would change the game up too, because in beginner, you would get a certain amount of auto blocks where the computer would block for you. So you could actually play that as the beginner, and it would actually help you from taking some of the nastier hits, you know, from the computer as you were kind of getting used to it. And then there was that expert mode, which the PAL gauge was just full all the time, and you could just unleash, you know, those power moves just, you know, one after the other. So if you were playing with a friend who was also good at the game, you know, it went from, you know, the more slow, methodical style gameplay, it just exploded into this, you know, just flashy power moves just going off constantly. So, you know, Samurai Showdown 3 was a big change for the system. It really veered into another lane of existence for that series. And I don't know, like I said, I think it gets a lot of unfair hate because a lot of people really love Sam Showdown 2 and they love that style, they love the way it feel, and Samurai Showdown 3 changed that incredibly, and so the whole game felt different because of it. And a lot of people really rejected that. They were like, oh, we wanted more of Sam Showdown 2, but instead Samurai Showdown 3 just sort of changed everything in this, you know, everything about how you played it. So like I said, maybe a lot of hate on that one, but you know, as far as technically, I thought they were both good games.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, they made a RPG out of Samurai Showdown. It was actually on the Neo Geo too. Well, it was on the Neo Geo CD. That's what it was. And yeah, I mean, back when they were making RPGs out of everything, even Mario got an RPG. But I mean, you know, you could make an RPG.
Funny enough, it wasn't the last Neo Geo RPG on a Sega console either.
Oh, okay. Wait.
Nakaruru.
Oh, right, Nakaruru. Yeah, the gift she gave me, right? Isn't that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was also Samurai Showdown related, right? Or
yeah, so it wouldn't be the last Samurai Showdown.
Wouldn't be the last
RPG on Sega console.
This is kind of a niche thing. Like, I don't know how many people have you guys had the opportunity to play, at least fire this up. Like, I don't think it's been fully translated on the Saturn. I know there's a translation project, and I'm thinking that might be on the Neo Geo CD version.
I believe the Neo Geo, the PlayStation or Neo Geo CD got an English one. There's a French one that was around for years and years, but like I can't remember if it was Neo Geo or PlayStation got an English one recently.
Yeah, it wasn't Saturn. I would love to see this game, you know, translated on the Saturn, so we'd have one more awesome English translation. This is one that I own on the Neo Geo CD, of course, all Japanese and kind of hard to make heads or tails of, but I mean, it's kind of what you imagine, walk around, talk to folks, and then get into these battles where you turn-based slash each other, you know. Great artwork, of course. It's Neo Geo SNK, good sprite work, and some good music on the Neo Geo CD soundtrack. So if folks haven't checked it out, it's just a kind of a side mention. I think it deserves a mention that it does exist. Did come out on the Saturn, just in Japan, and yeah, who knows? Hopefully, maybe one day we'll get a translation of that.
Maybe someday. You
guys want to add anything to the RPG part before we move on?
Oh, no, I don't have too much experience with it.
Yeah.
Same here.
Kind of like one of those rare curios. Like I again, if it does get translated, then of course I'm going to be, I should say, if it does get translated on Saturn, you know, then I'll know I'll be playing it for sure. But I haven't been able to check out the translation on Neo Geo CD yet. Okay, next up, we're going to let's talk about two more fighters, Sunsoft fighters, Galaxy Fight and Waku Waku 7. The look on Mel's face. Oh my God. Okay, so Sunsoft was weird, you know. They just kind of did things differently. Their games were often very colorful. The sprite work was definitely, you know, Sunsoft, and it's, you know, some good music here and there too, but they were just kind of weird, right? So yeah, go ahead, Mel. Tell us all about Galaxy Fight. One of the toughest as nails fighters.
I absolutely hate that game, man. I mean, there's so much about that game that turned me off. First, I hate the way it looks.
Oh, really?
You know, really? I mean, I don't like the sprite work to that. I mean, the backgrounds had loads of layers, you know, that was nice and all, but I didn't like the water and everything.
Oh, no, you didn't like the sprite work. Okay. So it was just a vibe, right? It was a look to it.
Yeah, it was a look. You know, it was art more than anything that turned me off.
Right.
You know, not necessarily something technical.
I mean, they are aliens, right? And they're kind of weird, kind of very strange.
They are unappealing aliens.
Unconventional alien design. Yeah, unappealing.
this game is one of those games, man, that I hated it right from the get-go because, the learning curve on this game is large and the AI aggression is unreal. I mean, this is one of those games, man, where if you're a newcomer to it, it absolutely pisses on you. It pisses on you. And I mean, it makes it so difficult to learn anything about it because the computer is just, I mean, it's an aggressive computer that is on top of you. You don't rest. You don't get to sit back and brace yourself. It's just bam, 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 bam. You're looking at a loading screen because your ass is whooped. And I mean, I don't know, man. That game, it never appealed to me. I never could learn the gameplay. All I ever wanted to do was sling the controller across the room whenever, I played it. So yeah, man, Galaxy Fight for me is a big thumbs down. Just never a fan of that one, man.
It's funny. I kind of like the way that it looks. I don't know, but I kind of like the way that it looks, but I completely agree with you on difficulty. Like, unless you turn it down to like stupid easy, you can't even beat more than the first battle. You might get lucky enough to beat the first battle, and then like the next one, you're just like, whoa! They like doubled the difficulty. So yeah, it's rough. But then again, I imagine if you get good against the computer, that you could just beat anybody. It's that.
You'd be I mean that computer. Yeah, it's frustrating too because you know how most fighting games, when you fight the first couple of characters, they kind of let the AI back off of you, so you're kind of getting a flow with it. That doesn't happen in this game too much. I mean, it's sort of like you say, the first guy can send you to the continue screen, and when that happens, it makes it difficult to enjoy. And of course, because I didn't like the visuals of it,
you were just turned off.
I never stuck with it. Yeah, it was just like, okay, I'm totally done with this, and that was it.
Either you guys, Dan, Pat, Galaxy Fight.
I think Mel summed it up perfectly for me. I think it just doesn't look good. It does. I just don't like the art at all, and it just feels like when you're playing it, I find it quite a miserable experience playing it because it feels like you say, you don't get a chance to get anything off. Like if you can do kind of projectile attacks, but the CPU is on you. It feels like you're like a 10-year-old kid who's gone to their first kind of martial arts class, and the black belt's gone, all right, I'll spar with you, and it's just started kicking your ass, like not teaching you anything.
Like, who did they have
around the dojo?
Who did they have beta test this game, right? Like they were like professional fighters, and they really needed to like put it out to a test group or something like that, so that they could understand, oh yeah, nobody's going to be able to play this.
Yeah, I mean, from an arcade quarter munching perspective, it's designed to drain money, isn't it? People aren't getting that first stage without putting in a few more coins. But it feels like they didn't hone it for the home market. And I think what frustrates even more is that we got this over here in PAL territories, and we didn't get other games.
Right.
I would have sacrificed this for any number of other fighting games that we didn't get.
Sorry, you don't get Turbo Star Sprites. You get Galaxy Fight.
Ironically, we got it in the West. We got it in the States too, and it does end up being a somewhat more expensive title just because they didn't print that many. I mean, they printed a fair amount, but I mean, again, it's not as good as the price commands, right? Because it just happens to be one of those games where, I mean, I would take Street Fighter Alpha 2 any day of the week, and that's a much more common game, but it's 10 times better, 20 times better, maybe, but yeah, there you go. Sunsoft. The next one was Waku Waku 7, which...
Oh, I didn't get the comment on it.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's right, Pat. How do you feel about Galaxy Fight?
So when I got into the Neo Geo, there were two games specifically people said to stay away from, and that was Galaxy Fight and World Star Hero. Any of the World Star Heroes games.
Really, Galaxy Fight was one of the stay away.
Yeah, honestly, the things that I like the aesthetics of it. I like the art of it. It's not bad. I mean, it definitely
it's
compared
different.
to the Waku Waku 7 and other ones.
Right.
It's got an aesthetic to it. It definitely has that Neo Geo look, if that makes sense. That Neo Geo soft sprite look on that,
Mm-hmm.
the color library, it definitely has that. But like, I don't know. Like, if I really want an ass whooping, I'll go play Art of Fighting on max difficulty.
Yeah,
But
it's
there's a lot there. It's just sad and that a lot of potential is wasted because it's just too kick your ass hard, and
mhm.
some of the mechanics are probably not the best.
I think maybe what I would say in terms of the visuals is that it maybe looks a little generic. You know, like that, like they're aliens, right? They're all like, it's a brand new series, right? And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one game. It could have been a series, who knows? But it's like, so it's a new title, and they're all new characters, but every single one of them looks kind of generic, you know, and not very memorable. Or it looks like a kind of like a generic version, copycat version of something else that's much more popular, you know. You get like the space dude, and you've got like the dinosaur guy, but I mean, it's all, yeah, very, very generic. Maybe good, you know, there's some good hand-drawn art there, but again, generic. And then like the game is just sucks to play. So there you go. Sorry, Pat, I didn't mean to go past you. So that's
No, I mean that's pretty much my feeling on it. Just play something better.
Avoid it at all costs. Waku Waku 7, though, let's talk. So this is a better game, I think. It's a great game.
I like it a lot.
On the Neo Geo CD. Like Waku Waku 7 is amazing. I absolutely love this game just because the art style and the very cartoony kind of like, just it's very over exaggerated animation and everything. But a lot of folks criticize this game. I know Mel spoke to this in his video that he did, like, I don't know, 6 years ago or whatever. You talked about how this game gets a lot of flack from the community because on Saturn, the visuals are like all crunchy, right? You know, like the backgrounds get kind of, I don't know if the scaling is done quite right or whatever, but it's kind of got like that Castlevania thing going on where the pixel art is kind of squished, you know? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think this game, just from a quality standpoint of how it plays, I think it's a fantastic game.
Okay.
To me, it plays a lot like, you know, Capcom Fighter in many ways, and it has that very cartoonish look. So the characters are appealing. You know, I mean, it's a game that when you fire it up, it's like, oh, you know, this is not so bad. And then you start to play it, and it's like the 3 punches and the 3 kicks, and it's like, oh, you know, these moves are coming off fairly easily. I'm really getting into this. It's a game, you know, that has that immediate gameplay and visual, you know, hey, this is pretty good. The problems with this game come when, you know, you start comparing it to the source material. And for some reason, the Saturn did not do the backgrounds to this game properly. You know, I don't know whether it's the scaling that's messed up, if it's the resolution of the scaling that's wrong, but everything comes across more jaggy, more, you know, just distorted, you know, especially, I mean, put it side by side with the, you know, arcade original, and it's kind of like you're looking at it and it's like, wow, they really didn't do a good job with those backgrounds. And
even the sprite scaling, the foreground sprites, like the character sprites, when they're at their regular size, they're fine. But then when they scale them small or big, they kind of get crunchy, you know, and it doesn't happen like that on the Neo Geo. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
But you're
it's
right.
Definitely smoother.
The gameplay, though, as far as gameplay goes, it's pretty good, right? This one requires the 4 meg cart, I think, right? Does this one require the 4?
I think this is still a 1 meg.
A 1 meg? Okay, I misspoke.
Yeah. But yeah, as far as gameplay goes, I think the gameplay is fine. I mean, I didn't feel any like debilitating or, you know, game impacting slowdown, which, you know, if you go back and you play all of these games back to the originals, you may feel some hitching, you know, here and there that may be a little different. Maybe, you know, you're coming away from it and you're saying, hey, I felt a little touch of slowdown during this combo that wasn't in the original. I mean, you could probably really nitpick heavily if you wanted to. But as far as gameplay goes, I think the gameplay was fine in this one. It was really the visuals you had to overlook if you were a big fan of the original Neo Geo version, because like you say, that pixelation that appeared at times it just wasn't in the original game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in all honesty, looking at it like a side by side, the Neo Geo one seems a lot more fluid and more animations compared to the Saturn one. It looks aesthetically better to me, and it looks smoother.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I definitely can see where you're going with that. It's like, it definitely. I mean, it's not like the worst downgrade. It's still playable, but looking at the Neo Geo one, it's like I'd rather play that one. That one looks really smooth
Right.
and I mean, it's even in English if you play it with an English ROM too. So I mean, there's a bonus to that on top of
Oh,
that.
good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you,
It's
Dan?
strange because it's a game that I think on Saturn it still is very visually appealing, but you
Mm-hmm.
can definitely see the downgrades, which is strange because the Sega Saturn port came out in '97 where we'd already had some pretty decent 2D fighting ports, not least from SNK and from Neo Geo games. So you'd have think, we know the story behind Castlevania, and that was kind of rushed to market. I don't know if this was so much,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if that's the reason for the downgrade. That it's kind of there's only 6 months between this and the arcade release.
Mm-hmm.
But as for my thoughts on the game itself, it's one of those ones that I think there's an instant visual hook from it
Yeah.
because it is bright and colorful, and you have these characters that are visually very appealing, and straight off the bat it's got an atmosphere to it that's great. I think gameplay wise, if you're going from Galaxy Force to this, it seems like it's the best game ever. I think when you play it next to other fighting games, it's kind of I'd say it's fine. It's not going to kind of blow your socks off from a gameplay perspective. It's just a kind of enjoyable time,
Something different.
rather than something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you certainly wouldn't kind of elevate it from a gameplay perspective across kind of the standard bearers of the genre. But if you're just looking for a good time with something a little bit different, with a different cast of characters, it's definitely one that's worth a look.
I agree. I think it's one of those weird kind of like side joint fighters that is kind of just a completely different flavor with the cartoony kind of graphics and everything like that. And the gameplay, the fight mechanics are different enough that it's just it's going to be unique from Street Fighter or a a typical SNK fighter. Although I think they did do a little bit better with like Astra Superstars. If you guys are familiar with that, Sunsoft always did this. They always made like kind of weird, quirky fighters. And I guess my hat's off to them because they were trying to not copy Capcom and SNK verbatim. Because those two were already going at it. And we're kind of almost mirroring each other. And so Sunsoft would just kind of be the weird, the weird cousin.
Absolutely love Astra Superstars.
Astra Superstars. Oh yeah,
so different.
Really,
it's
really.
STV though, not Neo Geo. But...
This is true. Yeah, STV. Exactly. No, it's not. But again, it's. I think they kind of did even better with that on the Saturn. And yeah, you're right. It was STV in the arcade, and then we're able to bring it home pretty much 1-to-1 because of that to the Saturn. So it did quite well. But yeah, of those two, avoid Galaxy Fight and definitely check out Waku Waku 7. Worth a shot on the Saturn.
100%
if you don't have the Neo Geo version. If you do have a Wii, for example, you can play the Neo Geo. I know it's on the Wii Virtual Console, and you can play it in 240p as well. Like on a CRT, it looks really, really sharp and plays really well. Believe it or not,
I think it's on one of the eShops online, like on some of the digital shops. I think it's up there.
Yeah, it's probably come to so many things now. But I just remember that's like where I first played it was on the Wii Virtual Console, the Neo Geo, just playing, dropping it down to 240p and playing with those really sharp pixels, and just looked excellent. But if folks can't play it any other way, or they just want to play it on the Saturn, it's still worth a look. I guess moving away from fighters, because we've been talking about, I mean, if anybody didn't know, Neo Geo is kind of known for fighters, so that's the bulk. That's the bulk of what we're talking about tonight. If you don't like fighting games, I guess this might not interest you that much, but we'll move away from that.
About an hour and a half into the cast, they're like,
the cast.
This ain't for me.
All right, let's talk Magical Drop. We got 2 titles, Magical Drop 2 and 3. Any fans?
It's okay.
Okay.
It's one.
I mean, it's a puzzle
go on.
game. I mean, there's a lot of fan servicey stuff in it, so I guess the people are
Ah,
into that.
okay.
I don't know. I never was I never was like I never liked it because I thought the art is kind of really bad
Kind of really bad.
on it.
Okay.
And I don't know, like to me, it's like if there's a puzzle game you want to play on the Neo Geo, it's gonna be Bust a Move or Puzzle
Definitely.
Bobble.
Yeah.
Like to me, I never really could vibe with it. It's an okay game, but like I don't know. To me, it never was too exciting,
Okay.
in my opinion.
So that's a no for you, Pat. Dan or Mel?
Gonna be no for me, dog.
I think I think it's both of them are quite enjoyable puzzle games. To be fair, I think
Okay.
they are. You can. I was playing them a while ago, and I think it was Magical Drop 2 that I really got sucked into, and I was playing it for a couple of hours. Like any good puzzle game, I think the problem with Magical Drop is its ability to stand out.
Mm.
Because anyone that's not experienced Magical Drop before, you see that opening screen, you're immediately going to think puzzle bubble, um, and then and then obviously it plays a little bit differently. But are you going to play this over any of the other kind of genre greats, even those ones that you can just play on the Sega Saturn?
Right.
It's difficult to say that, I think. But yeah, I think when you do get kind of a big chain of like the orbs, whatever, on your pointer, and you make a huge combo, and you get the arrows, and it hits them across, and you manage to clear quite a lot of the screen. That is really satisfying. But yeah, it's one that I think struggles to stand out, and one that struggles to really demand your time over anything else out there, is what I'd say about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean
Nice.
it's definitely not being played in mass anymore on the level of Puzzle Bobble or
Or
Tetris
Puyo
or
Puyo or
even
yeah.
even Puyo Puyo. It's just very okay-ish.
It's kind of
Like, I
yeah.
mean, it's not bad. I mean, the thing though is that there's just a lot of I don't know about. I mean, there's the only thing really from 3 is that they really increased the physics
The
on
fan serve.
certain
Oh, okay,
things.
right. Like when you score
Yeah,
big,
stuff that
jump up and down
bounces.
and stuff
Yeah,
like. Okay, yeah.
up and down things.
Mel,
So I guess
same.
there's that appeal if you're into that. So
You on the same track here, Mel?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, when it comes to puzzle games, it's got to be outstanding to get my time.
Right.
I mean, games like this, no.
Just doesn't do it.
I'm not going to
yeah.
waste I'm not going to waste too much time on it. When it comes to stuff like this, man, I would much rather play something like Super Puzzle
Fighter
Fighter.
Turbo. Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
yeah,
that's
I
probably
would
the best puzzle game
much
on the Saturn, to be completely
yeah,
honest.
I would so much rather play that than
Right.
something like this.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, it exists, and they are Neo Geo ports on Saturn. I can't really speak to how well they perform because I'm in the same camp as you guys. Well, not Dan. Dan has played them recently, but I haven't played Magical Drop on Saturn in a long time. So I imagine they're
it's
puzzle
probably
games.
gonna be another game
They
puzzle
probably
game that
run
my
fine.
girlfriend can kick my ass at.
All right. So for folks who are not fighting game fans, this is probably their favorite Neo Geo. I would guess Metal Slug is probably their favorite Neo Geo game. If you're not a fighting,
Absolutely.
I mean, it's some people's just favorite game, full stop. But I mean, yeah. So Metal Slug, Nazca. I mean, this was a pretty crazy game when it first came out, right? Like all this blood and gore. Even the arcade, you're just running along like
What are you
without
talking about? They just do sweat. Just white, white sweat comes out.
You're
of them.
just a soldier who's just running along, unceremoniously slitting throats and firing grenades, and you're just like creating just a trail of carnage behind you, and it's almost comical, you know, because it's like not a care in the world. I think Alien Hominid kind of copied this a little bit, you know, where he's just like slitting throats and stuff, and it all came back to the whole Metal Slug thing, where it's just gratuitous violence but almost comical. Really, really good artwork and a great music. You know, what can I say? Like, we're all Metal Slug fans, so whoever raises their hand first can go first. No? Pat. Okay, fine. Pat,
Okay,
you
I'll go first then. All right, so Metal Slug is probably my favorite Neo Geo game, next to another one we'll talk about later. But if I had to pick one and I was forced to play it, it'd probably be this one, especially for the single player aspect. I really enjoy it. The game is amazing. I can pretty much one CC it up to like the fourth or fifth level. Then I'm starting to get my ass kicked on the last two levels. They're just little. I need to get back into the grind on that, but I really enjoy them. They're really worth CCing and working on. The graphics are amazing. The music is probably the most iconic music in any video game, in my opinion. I love the soundtrack, just amazing. Boss battles are really fun and unique, and even though they can be frustrating, it's pretty fun to figure out the issues. And like the thing is that the game's so replayable that you forget after a while that there's 2 through 5, or I guess 6 now. I think 6, maybe a 7th one came out. I don't know, but like there's so much replayability with it. It's just like, and there's like 5 of them on the Neo Geo. So like you get through the first one, it's like, oh, I got 4 more I have to get through that are just as amazing, or if not almost better. And I mean, besides 2, but 2 is a special case. That we're not going to get into that. TLDR, the performance is really bad on Metal Slug 2, but on the Saturn version, I think the performance is hindered a bit. There is a lot of sluggish slowdown that really is different than Neo Geo. There's some sound effect differences, or some sound differences that's like, I think the announcer doesn't have the line for some of the things that are removed for him, so it's kind of a weird one they made. But for the most part, it's pretty playable. I can pretty much get to the same CC level as the arcade version of it, but there's a bit of a difference on it if you're playing it, but I would still recommend it if you like Metal Slug.
I think Metal Slug might be, it's one of those games in a world where everybody's complaining about, oh, we don't like 2D anymore, right? And it's all about the 3D, but you would see Metal Slug and that would really shut you up. You'd be like, okay, but this is really cool, because, like I'd never seen a game that had that level of detail, like all the pixels flying everywhere, grenades, explosions, everything is animated down to like the finest grain of detail, so if just from a visual aesthetic and aspect, it really shuts a lot of people up when people seem to like unanimously love this game. At least they can appreciate it from a visual aesthetic, but yeah, I would agree with you too. It's not quite as smooth as the arcade original, but it's serviceable. What do you guys think? No.
Yeah, I think, that's Metal Slug is one of those games where any CD-based system that even came close at the time, it was impressive because there was so much animation there. I mean, you got to think, when you're running through that battlefield and your weapon is firing off, guys are on fire, they're bursting open, blood's coming out, vehicles are exploding into various pieces of shrapnel. I mean, there's so much going on in this game that, I mean, for it to be ported as well as it was, I was really impressed by it. I mean, I definitely think you can feel a lot more hitching in the Saturn version than the original arcade. And I think that's probably just, that's conversion issues right there. The company that did this, they had to take the game from the Neo Geo, which, as you all know, it uses sprites for everything. So everything that's moving on that screen, every background, everything is a sprite on the Neo Geo.
Right.
And of course, you're moving that over to the Saturn. And how did they do that? Were the sprites specifically done by the first VDP? Did the backgrounds have the advantage of using VDP2? And if it didn't use that setup, that means the Saturn was having to push everything with VDP1. I think if you were a fly on the wall during development, you would understand why this game runs the way it does, because that's not an easy conversion to the Saturn with the way the Saturn handles two-dimensional visuals. So you get some hitching, you get some more slowdown in different spots. I don't think that that's, a terrible thing at that time, where we're not talking about emulation here. This was not an emulation on the Saturn. This was a conversion. They took the Neo Geo code, they ripped it apart, they rebuilt it on the Saturn. And that's really important to understand. It wasn't going to run the same. Right. It wasn't going to sound exactly the same. that's the way it worked back then. As a matter of fact, you could apply that to every single game we've talked about here as to why it's not one-to-one parity. It was never going to be one-to-one parity. It's the same reason why the Capcom fighters were never one-to-one parity, because they were always conversions, and that makes a difference. And when you consider that with the Saturn's limited memory, which this game only used the 1 megabyte card itself to get the game as close as they did, in my opinion, is nothing short of amazing. Because I think it's comparable to the Neo Geo CD version overall, whereas the Neo Geo CD had way more memory and the exact same hardware as the arcade version. So I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, no way do I walk away from this unimpressed. I think it ran as good as you could expect a game like that to run on the Saturn, being a conversion. I think it sounds fine. I mean, where it counts is the gameplay. And, like Pat said, it's kind of like you roll into the arcade, you're able to get to a certain point. You should be able to get to that certain point on the Saturn. The gameplay does not have any impact to it of any significance to where you're going to throw the controller down and say, damn it, I got killed right here because the game slowed down. It's not like that. So I think this was a great port. I think a lot of people rag on it way the hell too hard, because of its differences. But for what it is, I mean, go compare it to the PS1 version. Ooh. It crushes that version. So, I mean, that was a truly poor port right there. The Saturn version, no, it wasn't Neo Geo 100%, but I think you could play that and still really enjoy that game.
Yeah, you can definitely, if you went to the arcade and once you see it, you definitely can get your hits in and practice up on the Saturn version for sure.
Yeah.
Feel the same way, Dan?
Yeah. So Metal Slug was the game when my friend got a Neo Geo CD. It was basically for Metal Slug because this game, you was just saying about everything had to be 3D back in the day, but Metal Slug kind of turned that perception on its head because everything in there is so expressive. It's got a real kind of, it's like you're watching like a 1930s cartoon with all kind of the way that things move and everything. And everything is so well designed from a visual standpoint that it gets its hooks in you so easily. And then you combine that with, gunplay that it plays a lot more like, say, Gunstar Heroes, I think, than kind of Contra. But it's just so much fun. Single player, it's a laugh. You get a friend next to you to play through it. It's absolutely amazing. The Saturn port itself, yeah, there's definitely some slowdown in there. But it's like you were saying, Mel. It's so impressive for what at the time was coming from the Neo Geo. The Neo Geo CD had over double the amount of RAM that the Saturn had, as far as I'm aware, even with the 1 megabyte RAM card. But for the most part, the gameplay's absolutely fine, and you've got all the different visual touches in there. It still looks great. It just slows down. It just chugs a bit in certain sections when you get a lot of enemies or bullets on screen, and it's still one. For some reason, it's one of these ones where, for some reason, the Saturn still is kind of my preferred way to play. I've got this on Steam. I've got it in various collections. There's other ways that I can play this, but there's just something about the Sega Saturn version that just really appeals to me. I don't know. Maybe it's because it's on the Sega Saturn.
That's good enough for me.
But it's but it's one that I just love, playing through it on there. And of course, you've got the PS1 version. If you compare it to that, with its mid-level loading, because there's so much that's going on in a stage.
Right.
Did you get obviously it loads up the title screen and it loads in a stage at a time. But the fact that you think that these fighting games, King of Fighters, for example, it loads the stage and the two fighters, then you beat a fighter and it loads, and then you beat another fighter and it loads.
Right.
Well, Metal Slug, it just loads the whole stage all in one go. and you look at the PlayStation version, it has the mid-level loading. I think it's very impressive that it's able to do that with the amount of variety that you see from the beginning to the end. At the beginning of the first stage, you're kind of plonked down, and then at the end, you're fighting that huge battleship, and you've got all these different characters in between. You've got the vehicle, you've got these. You've got kind of the shacks that you shoot those and they all fall to pieces. There's just so
huge
much
explosions
crammed
too.
in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and given where this came from, you've got to forgive some of the slowdown on there, and I don't think it inhibits the game at all,
Not
really.
at all.
If you're a purist, then yeah, it can be a little bit unsightly, but if you just want a game to sit down with kind of a friend or your kids or something, this is a great one to just plug two controllers into and just run through. It's brilliant fun.
It's also amazing how Metal Slug itself, like the craft, is like it runs really great, but then when it's taking a couple hits, it starts to hobble along, and the animation changes. It's just like all beat up to shit, It's just like hobbling along, So you got to love that level of detail there. Honorable mention, not a Neo Geo game, but same folks that created Metal Slug. If folks check out In the Hunt, that's more of the same kind of goodness. Definitely slows down. It's a submarine version of Metal Slug, basically. A kind of a shmup, more of a traditional shmup than Metal Slug is, like a run and gun. But yeah, check that out as well. Same amazing art.
It's really your game.
Same amazing art style. We did get it on the Sega Saturn. There is some considerable slowdown, but it might actually help you in places because it's like bullet time, But yeah, I just figured that was an honorable mention, so folks know it's there, even though it isn't a port from Neo Geo. All right, so Metal Slug, definitely, we're all on the record saying folks absolutely have to check that one out on the Saturn. Let's talk about Pat's favorite game, Twinkle Star Sprites. Go for it, Pat.
Absolutely.
Tell me, why is this your favorite game? Your favorite?
I think it's just a really unique shoot 'em up. There's not a lot of games that are like that, where it's a shoot 'em up that's actually a competitive shoot 'em up. Like there's a lot of committed puzzle games, a lot of competitive fighters. You don't see very many, or if at all, shoot 'em ups that are competitive in the nature that you fight other opponents. It's really unique in that aspect. The aesthetic is really cute. I love the art on it. The character designs are just amazing. I love the music. All the character sprites are really amazing on there. Yeah, the cute art of it, like when the characters get hit and burnt up. And it's a lot of mechanics and stuff that make you, you can go from base level and go up and higher, and like you can just get way better at the game as you go on learning the mechanics of it.
This was a hit at
and
PRGE.
The Saturn version.
This was a hit at PRGE. A lot of people came over and were like, "What is this? What, a competitive shmup?" A lot of people didn't know.
Yeah,
about it.
I always bring those up at cons because everybody loves it because it's like unique and weird.
Right.
So it's always a hit at cons. Everyone loves playing it, even though a lot of people don't get it. It's still easy to pick up and play. So it's one of those perfect con games where it's like it's easy to learn, difficult to master, one of those things. So you get that level, and it's just a really fantastic game. The Saturn version, I think, in my opinion, actually is the better version to get of it. Like it's actually the better than the Neo Geo version in terms of there's more content on it, and there's more characters that I think really justify getting the Saturn version over even the Dreamcast or the Neo Geo version. And it shows in the price tag. It's one of those $100 game, like in the hundreds compared to the other Neo Geo games, and probably is one of the more expensive Neo Geo games on that console. But it's worth it. There's another second disc that it comes with that's a bunch of fan content, like a bunch of art and design and stuff like that. That I definitely think that if you love the game series, it's definitely a must get, and it's probably, in my opinion, probably the definitive version is the Saturn version. But I was curious what you guys thought about it and your experiences playing it.
It's definitely different. Yeah, go on, Mel.
No, you go ahead, man.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I think there's an allure about it because it's so visually appealing. Right off the bat, it's got that. It's kind of like a top-down cute 'em up in that respect. So it has that kind of feel of like Pop and Twinbee and Fantasy Star, I suppose, to a degree. It's like really cutesy visuals in a shoot 'em up.
Right.
But the mechanics behind it, I mean, like you're saying, Pat, it's very easy to pick up, and I think the toughest thing about it is roping other people in to kind of play it with you regularly, because it really is a game that kind of, it really comes into its own when you're playing it with someone. I do find that when you're playing against a computer, it does feel kind of a little less engaging, from my perspective. But I think you rope someone into playing it with you, and if you both spend some time with it, enough time to kind of get good at it, then it's one that I think you can really sink a lot of time into. It's just one of those games that I think it seems like on a surface level, if people look at it, they're kind of like, what the hell is this? But I think if you get people to invest in it, it really rewards you, especially if you're playing it competitively with a friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a funny story with this game I want to tell you real quick. When this game came out for the Saturn, I didn't import it right away. I didn't actually get it until sometime later. So this is right around 2000 or so. I get the game, I'm playing it. I'm like, wow, this is so unique. It's kind of like a shoot 'em up / puzzle game, Pat, slash multiple genres you could fit the sucker into. And, it was kind of like, I thought I was good at the game, thought I was good. And so I'm working with a guy and we're talking about, games, and I'm like, yeah, I just got this game. It's really fun. And he's like, oh, I know that game. I really like that too. So I invite this dude over. He absolutely destroys me in it. I mean, just absolutely kills me. And it really taught me right then, this is no simple game. This game has a lot of mechanics in the background that once you learn it, you go from being, an entry level player, you can really kick some ass in this. And that's kind of what I began to appreciate about it, because, the way the game plays, where you're having it, the enemies are coming on the screen, you have to hit them, in a certain order, or as they're coming in to, create your combos and whatnot, to do the damage to the other character. And I saw him playing it, and it was like, wow, he's purposely not going for these guys, but he's going for these guys. Then he tries to go back for these guys, or he's trying to hit certain, it's just the way he played it changed everything about my opinion of that game, because it's so much deeper than what you first play it as. Because when you first play it, it's just like, oh, I'm going to shoot these things and these other things are going to fly across the screen and hit the guy, and that's all there is to the game. But it actually gets a lot deeper than that when you spend more time with it. The mechanics, man, this is one of those games that when you get good at it, there's a huge difference from when you first start. And that's, I think, what you want to tell people. It's like, don't let the surface, sort of, I mean, there's a complexity there way beyond that surface, simplicity that, I don't think a lot of people see initially. A lot of people just see a very simple shoot 'em up, or a very simple versus shoot 'em up when they first see it. A lot more to it than that, guys. Play this game, watch somebody that's good at it play it, and I think it's so rewarding. This is actually one of the best Neo Geo ports on the Saturn, in my opinion. Give it a chance. There's a lot here to learn.
I will say, as someone who's not an expert, Pat is right that it's incredibly appealing and like fun to pick up and play, even for a complete beginner, So like, yeah, there's like, you could get endlessly good at it, and spend so much time mastering it. But even if you just walk up and are like, what's this, and pick it up and play, it immediately hooks you. I feel like that's, and that's something to say for this game among all Saturn games, it just immediately hooks you. It's kind of like Virtua Fighter 2 immediately hooks you, or I don't know, like you come up, and I've seen it happen so many times. Like Pat and I went at PRGE, folks have never heard of this game before, but they're hooked by the visuals, and then they start playing it and they're like, what? There's nothing else like it, really. Quite like, just like Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, is like a puzzle and fighting game and stuff like that. And that has its own, like, there's almost nothing like it. But I mean, there really is nothing else like it, and so it kind of stands
and the
alone.
game is hard to get people off of too, like at those cons.
Oh yeah.
Like, I don't think I've ever saw like that game like be empty at any period.
Yeah, so that's a huge, like, the game just speaks for itself. So Twinkle Star Sprites is one that I think is kind of a sleeper hit. Everybody should be checking out on the Saturn.
You set up a tournament scene for that one.
Yeah, you should. You'd be the guy to do it. Well, another.
I'll get it going.
So this is a puzzle game, Puzzle Bobble 2, classic, right? We also got Puzzle Bobble 3, but that's not a Neo Geo game. That's like just a Taito arcade. I don't know what hardware that came on. But anyway, Puzzle Bobble 2 was just like one of the most classic Neo Geo games that I would hear in my pizza restaurant, like dit 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 dit, yaboo,
I love Puzzle Bobble, one of my favorites of all time.
And you always knew when you heard the little boing, boing, I don't know, whatever that sound effect is of the balls firing off, exactly. Yeah, you just know it when you hear it. You could hear it like from far away because it's very high pitched. But
it's like one of the only games that overshadows its origin games.
My wife doesn't even really like video games that much, but Puzzle Bobble 2 she makes exceptions for, because it's just that fun. It really is like, and we've had some online tournaments with like what the Puzzle Bobble 3, I think, online, and there's some folks that are really, really good at Puzzle Bobble out there. I'm kind of in the middle, but so I'm not terrible.
Yeah,
but
I think you kicked my butt at it, Dave. You're pretty good at it.
Yeah, but then somebody came along and kicked my butt like right after. But you guys all Puzzle Bobble 2 fans here? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of hard to go wrong, right? It's just
it's probably my favorite puzzle game of all time.
What about you, Mel?
It's definitely.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Dan.
No, all I was saying is it's definitely up there for me. It's one of the best puzzle games of all time. It's one that I first remember seeing in an MVS camp, which I was actually vacationing in Greece, I think, and they had there was a restaurant, and it was the original Puzzle Bobble, and it was kind of at the back somewhere, and I could hear the music just as you were saying just now, Dave. And it pulled me in straight away. So I was begging my parents for some change to play it, and I got playing, and I fell in love with it instantly. It's just the series itself is just so simple, but there's so much depth in the execution of it, and it's just that, again, it's that visual appeal, and you've got Bob and Bub working the
they're so cute,
the arrow to shoot,
dinosaurs,
to move them across.
Very clean aesthetic too.
It is. And Bust a Move 2 or Puzzle Bobble 2
right.
On the Sega Saturn is definitely my favourite way to play it. I've had so many different versions of Puzzle Bobble over the years, but 2 is definitely my favourite way to play. I think that's just kind of where they got it just right. They improved on everything from the first game without compromising anything, I felt, and it's a fantastic port. I'm not sure if there's any differences between that or the arcade or Neo Geo originals, but yeah,
there's a difference. It has a worse title in the United States.
It's called in America. Well, it has worse cover art in the United States. It's got like this guy with his eyelids being like held open.
I absolutely hate the US.
It is the worst
version of that. Like everything. It's like even the second game is called Bust a Move Again. What a horrible title.
Seriously. I mean, that could be like the poster child for bad US artwork. That game, I think, often gets referenced almost like meme worthy. What the hell were they thinking with this cover? Go, Mel.
And there's the baby one too.
That's the thing is, okay, so Mel probably got a copy of this back in the day. So I want to hear about it. Did you import this?
No, I did not.
Oh,
I
okay.
actually didn't play this until the US version.
Oh,
but,
okay.
This is one of those games that it nearly has the appeal of Tetris, doesn't it? That instant, you know exactly how to play it. Visually, it's there. You understand everything you see on the screen from the moment you start moving things around. it really is one of the few puzzle games that has that instant pickup appeal. You know what you're doing, you know the point of it, and it's instant fun. And not too many puzzle games are able to do that right off the bat. I think that's why Tetris was so appealing, was because it was just like, I know how to play this, I know what I'm supposed to do, and I enjoyed it. And in my opinion, this game was exactly the same way. It's one of the few games that I can get people in my family or friends that do not like video games will actually sit and play. And again, they know how to play it pretty much a couple seconds into it. It's like, okay, I move this around, I fire it, same color bubbles, you know what you're doing. Right. And, from there, it's a great time. And the Saturn version was a great version. The color was on point, sound was good. I mean, you really can't go wrong with it. I mean, as far as puzzle games go, if you want something that's going to appeal to the people around you, that you want people to play video games with you, or, this is just one of those games you want to throw at them because it just has that instant pick up and play appeal, which is so important, to a puzzle game. I mean, in my opinion, I think overall Super Puzzle Fighter trumps it for me in terms of overall playability. But there's the difference between number 2 and 3 on a top 10 is huge. This is definitely up there.
Well, Puzzle Fighter is also a much more complex puzzler. There's just so much more to it. This is a much more simple and like streamlined essence, but it is a really great feeling when you kind of like get this huge stack, like this huge clump hanging by one thread, and then you like take it down and it just like all clears over
it's
to
like
the
peeling off like the glue off your fingers and that giant thing.
Sure.
Giant streak. It just feels so good.
But then it all gets piled onto your enemy, and they're just like, oh, they lost. Yeah. So you could be almost looking like you're going to be the one to lose, right? But then you fire off one big shot like that, and you could be clearing your whole screen and sending it over there. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah. One of the best like non-fighting Neo Geo ports to Saturn, so folks should definitely check that out. And Puzzle Fight.
But seriously though, what's with that cover art? For
what
God's
is
sakes?
with that cover art? Yeah, and I didn't like 3 as much. Maybe because I don't know. Yeah, like Dan said, I just feel like 2 was just perfect. It was just complex enough, just simple enough. The graphics looked clean. The visuals were amazing. It actually got a really good port to Super Nintendo as well, which it doesn't look as good, but that's the version I grew up playing. Actually, was on the Super Nintendo, and that was still a lot of fun. But yeah, I always choose Puzzle Bobble 2 or Bust a Move 2. We're pretty much almost done. We got to talk about Stakes Winner. Any takers? Stakes Winner 1 and 2. You guys horse race fans?
Who's going to be the winner steak and dinner?
I mean, now this is like, horse racing was really popular in Japan, I guess, because they had like the Derby Stallion Saturn. You had a lot of horse racing video games in Japan. Not so much in the United States, or I dare say even the UK.
We're more a fan of dog racing.
Any comments on Stakes Winner before we just move on? Yay, nay?
No, these games had a hell of a barrier of entry because they were in Japanese as well. I mean, did any of them come out in the US?
Not that I can.
Yeah, I don't think they did.
Yeah.
So, I can't imagine anybody wanting to play that in the United. I mean,
no. So I mean, yeah, it was one of those things where you had a barrier of entry with the language anyway. So this is going to be a hard one to get into. Not even counting that you need to have an interest in horse racing to begin with.
Like when you go
it looks like there is an English version of Stakes Winner 1 and 2 on the Neo Geo, but not for the Saturn.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't know. For folks who are into like horse racing video games, it's there. You can check it out. We don't have any personal experience with it. I mean, the extent of my experience with horse racing games is like going to the Midway at the fair, and you'd have those little like jockeying horses. You'd throw like a skee ball at the thing, and it would make your horse go across. Like that's the extent of my horse race gaming. What about you, Dan? Were you gonna toss in a comment?
Yeah, I've played it, or I've attempted to play it, but it's like Mel was saying, it's a difficult one to get into because even the Sega Saturn port, you have to go through several menus, and I don't know what the hell I'm clicking on. I'm just like, just take me to the game because this is an arcade port, isn't it? Just let me play the damn game. And yeah, once I got there, I was clueless as to what I was doing. I've tried numerous times, just like whipping the horse at various paces. At first I was hammering a button, and my poor horse, and it's quite good because the horse face gets quite expressive. If you're over whipping it, then it starts like panting and looking sad. So that made me feel bad. But then I tried, pacing myself, trying to collect the power ups that go around the course, and I just couldn't get anywhere with it. So I don't know what I was choosing or how to progress with it. It's great that it exists. It's great that there's something different like that. But I think you have to kind of have a vested interest and kind of know what you're doing through those menus to maybe get the most out of it.
Right.
You shouldn't feel too bad, Dan, though. I mean, while it is punishment to whip it, it's definitely a lot worse than it getting last and being turned into glue. So
in Japan, didn't they? I seem to remember they even had like a way that either it was the Famicom or another system where you could like do horse betting online, like via your online.
There's a whole
Famicom
system for that. It was like a PC thing. There's a video online for that.
Yeah, it's just
is the SHIRO or something like that, or I don't remember. There's a video some guy did on this horse betting machine. Virtual horse racing. Horse racing in Asia is very taken seriously.
All right, so to round ourselves out here, we'll talk about 3 of the, I think, lesser fighters. I could be wrong, so tell me if I'm wrong. But these are the last 3 games we have to talk about here: is World Heroes Perfect, Fighters History Dynamite, and Ragnagard. Let's just start with World Heroes Perfect. So any takers?
I'm a fan of this one.
Hell no. Get that out.
Oh man, I have got to hear this. Let's hear it, man.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those like guilty pleasures on this one. I know it's not great, in terms of visuals. It feels, the art style does feel a little bit bland, but I just love the setup of it. That you've got all these figures creatively named so that they're not quite the representation of who they're meant to be through history. But it's kind of like they tried something recently, didn't they, where you've got like a fighting game that you fight Santa Claus and everything in there. It's kind of on that vein. You've got like Rasputin and all these different characters through history, Joan of Arc and stuff. And I don't know, there's just something about how bonkers that kind of setup is and the way that you make your way through the game that I really appreciate. And I think the Sega Saturn port itself is quite a good one. I know that the arcade original I don't think is that well thought of, with Neo Geo original, but I think it translates quite well to Sega Saturn play. It's not one that I think visually is going to blow your socks off, although the way that you progress through it and the game goes through at a pretty decent pace because there's not too many loading screens in there. The gameplay itself I think it's fine. I don't think it's terrible. I think it's fairly, you can pick it up. It's quite intuitive. If you've played other fighting games, it's good enough. But yeah, there's just an appeal about it in the way that it's set up, and I know that kind of feels maybe a bit shallow and superficial, but I just love the idea that it's like someone's like, right, well, what if we got all these icons back through time and they all started fighting each other? And yeah, that kind of was enough to rope me in. And the game below it may be probably kind of an average fighter, but it's one that I own physically and go back to pretty regularly.
I mean, well, Goku's in the game, so I guess that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So with all the other fighters, I guess you're right. I was gonna say it seems a little generic by comparison, but the premise is actually pretty unique. Like, people from famous figures from history. But yeah, it's definitely a lesser fighter bad. You're just like, like it smells bad.
There's so many better games on the Neo Geo you can play. Why would you waste your time playing World Star Heroes? There's so many good games. Come on.
I mean, it happens to be one of the cheaper AES it happens to be one of the cheaper titles for a reason, right? Because
I wonder why.
Yeah. But yeah, but Dan likes it, so there you go. Check it out and see if you jive with how Dan feels about it. Mel, you pretty much think it's a pass?
Oh man, this game sucks ass, man. Straight up.
No mincing of words.
Oh no, man. This is one of those games where I gotta agree with Pat. It's kind of like you're looking at the library of the Saturn. Why in God's name would you choose this? I mean, it's just the way it looks. I mean, I guess it's got Street Fighter movements for the moves. So if you're new to the series, you'll at least be able to get the moves off. But I never really found the characters all that appealing. I mean, the story is blah.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't care about none of that. And I really, I never liked the World Heroes games to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the very least, World Heroes Perfect did away with that bullshit where the power of the fucking punch and kick was depending on how long you held the button. I mean, remember how that was in the ones before this one? It was like depending on how long you held the button, it would be like how powerful the attack would be.
Right.
I mean, this did away with that. So I guess if you're going to play a World Heroes game, World Heroes Perfect would probably be the one you would want to play, just because it kind of refined the series to be what this is. But God, man, I wasn't a fan of it. And man, that last guy in this game, what was his name? It was like Neo Geo. Oh, has there ever been a more cheap ass character in a game, dude? Like, dude, yeah. Anyway, not a huge fan.
Bosses cheat as hell.
This game is
all cheaters. Every single one of the Neo Geo bosses, none of them play fair. Especially you, Mr. Karate. Fuck you.
Okay. Okay. Fighters History Dynamite. Any takers on that? Yeah.
I don't think I've heard of this game.
Mel.
Yes. Yeah. No.
This is actually not a terrible game. It was known as Karnov's Revenge, right?
Oh, Karnov's Revenge. Yeah.
Oh, Karnov's. That's why I was like, what the heck is that one?
Yeah,
oh,
see,
right.
I think that's why a lot of people are like, what the hell is, because the name change there, in my opinion, didn't make any sense at all. It's like, why the hell are you going to bring up Karnov? It's like Karnov was like, back years and years ago, it was this action game, and then you're going to name the fighter after it because one of the characters, was in it. But yeah, I mean, this isn't a terrible game. I mean, it's not a great game, but it's one of those games you can pick up and play fairly easily. You're not going to detest it. You're not going to walk away from it and go, wow, that's one of the worst fighters I ever played. I think the hate for this game may be a bit too much. It's an okay fighter, I think.
Yeah, the only thing I know about Fighters History is that lawsuit video when they were getting sued by Street Fighter because they're all ripoffs. That's really the only thing I know about Fighters History. Just that, but kind of funny that's gotten that far.
Yeah, like all the character art looks like complete ripoffs of what, Dan?
Oh, it's no doubt it was heavily inspired by Capcom's games.
Inspired.
Or we didn't rip them off at all. It's all original.
Okay, Dan, go for it.
They won that lawsuit from total BS. There's no way that lawsuit would have passed any other time.
I think for me, it's one that it's kind of just doesn't stick in the memory. I think it is just kind of Street Fighter like. It's kind of inoffensive. It looks okay. It plays okay.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything really wrong with it. It's just you wouldn't play it over kind of the real deal.
Right.
And you probably wouldn't play it over most of the other games that we're talking about. I wouldn't play it over World Hero Perfect. Mel and Pat probably think differently.
I mean, I honestly, to be honest, if I had to pick one of those, it's either play World Star Heroes or yeah, World Heroes, play Karnav's Revenge, or get nails driven to my fingernails. It's a hard choice either way, but I'd probably have to go with the nails in my fingernails if I had to pick.
Yeah, well, Ragnagard is a real turd, if you ask me. That's the last. Now that one just looks like ass. You know, I don't know about you guys.
It's just not good. But like I looked up reviews for this because I didn't really know much about it. Like I played a little bit, but
right.
The two standout reviews I heard from it is someone said, "Boy, I thought this game was a fever dream," and another one was like, "This reminds me of Clay Fighter in a way." What a way to describe those games.
Yes, like the digitized kind. Yeah, I'm sure Mel has like choice words about this game.
Oh man, you know, dude, this game actually came out in 1997, I believe, and this is one of those games where you have to wonder what the hell the publisher and developers were thinking. It's kind of like, think about how many great fighting games were out on the Saturn by the time 1997 rolls around. I mean, you're talking a lot of great fighters, and you're sitting there making this heap of shit. I mean, not only does it look absolutely disgusting, I mean, you're basically talking about pre-rendered visuals that are muddy, you know, poorly animated, backgrounds that look just awful. I mean, who the hell was this for? Is what I want to know. By now,
probably should have tapped in the Killer Instinct players, but the Neo Geo is just not the system to do pre-rendered graphics. It's really only limited aspects of them that's actually good.
Yeah, and this is one of those games that when you first play it, you are taken aback by how ugly it is. It is offensively ugly.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, wow, there is nothing on my screen that I find appealing. And then, of course, on top of that, you add to the fact that it plays terrible.
Yes.
I mean, it is very mechanical. It is very, you know, it almost like you have to sort of watch the animation flow before you can like move on to something else. It's not even a jankiness to it. It's just bad. You know, you're playing it for a few minutes and it's like, Jesus, did anybody who created this really stop to think we're putting this into our market with so many great games? Who is going to buy this? And Pat is right. I mean, I remember the reviews just absolutely eviscerating this, you know, because it was what it was in the Saturn's life cycle. You know, sometimes developers, they really need to ask themselves, is this game going, not just is it going to sell well, but, you know, what is the market for it? And this game had no market. This was a bad game.
Yeah, it just was awful. It just wasn't, it really didn't like appeal to me at all. Like it's just I mean, imagine thumbing through this on a Neo Geo in the arcade. It's like you hit Art of Fighting, you hit something like King of Fighters, you hit Metal Slug, then you hit the button and this pops up. It's like, who in their right mind would like select this button on the force slot and be like, yeah, I'm gonna play this over Metal Slug. Seriously. Even Metal Slug, like seriously, like even the earlier Neo Geo games, like Art of Fighting, like are visually better and have better gameplay than this. Like I would play Fatal Fury, the original, over this game any day. It's like, why?
Yeah. It's the visuals are just, there's just no excuse for them really. Whenever I look at this, you think Mortal Kombat, which kind of really was the big step up in digitized visuals, was 1993. Killer Instinct was what? Was that 95, 96?
It's about right.
They, you know, games with great pre-rendered visuals, with decent pre-rendered visuals, had been around for quite a while by the time this came out. You bring that onto kind of a console, well, an arcade the Neo Geo, which has got an abundance of brilliant fighting games already, and put it over to the Sega Saturn in '97, which already has a huge array of fighting games on there. Plus, by this point, the push for those digitized sprites really had kind of died down a bit. There wasn't. They were kind of going out of style. People wanted, true 3D, and if it wasn't,
Definitely.
if it wasn't proper 3D,
I mean, Mario 64 was already out by this point.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's it. And I know it uses kind of some kind of pre-rendered assets for 2D, but there was no game really leaning into this art style in 1997. So it's like you were saying, Mal, who was this for? What were they thinking? Who sat there and, came up with these character ideas? So that's the thing that baffles you about these games, isn't it? Someone sat there and was like, I've got an idea for a game. And then someone else has gone, this is what their art style is going to look like. Here's some character drawings. And people all the way through this process have gone, yep, that looks good. That's good. That's what we'll go with, and we'll ship this. And it's just like, what were you thinking? But yeah, it looks terrible. It plays terrible. But at least, just like World Heroes, it does have Goku in it in this one, so they've got that in common.
So, at least you got Goku. So I mean, that's
here's the question.
Easily worth the probably $150 for the cart for the AES.
Yeah, $150 for. Is that what this goes for?
No, I meant like an actual cartridge, like back in the day, like the AES. It's like you're getting this on the AES. It's like you have to pay $150 and you get this. I honestly would probably punch a wall. Like a wall would be punched.
Yes.
I would be incredibly upset if I paid $150, $200 and I get that. It's like, why God?
So here's my question.
The story. The story was stupid to this game. I mean, the story was that a god was like, I don't remember it exactly, but the gist of it is a god was creating a new planet and wanted to take the planet over, but he just couldn't leave heaven supervised. So the tournament is to find somebody to lead heaven or something to that effect while he goes and takes over the new planet. I mean, even the story is stupid.
That is stupid.
That sounds about right.
Okay, here's my question. Mel, Desert Island, you have to choose between this or Galaxy Fight. Which is it?
Oh, man. Can I choose drowning on the way to the island?
Sure,
because I'd probably choose that.
Just drown yourself in the ocean.
No, but seriously, which would you rather not play more? Which would be more of a punishment?
Honestly, I'd probably have to go Ragnar just for the fact that I'd probably have a stroke and keel over trying to play Galaxy, fight constantly.
Right.
That is one thing is the Ragnar is, a lot more playable in terms of ease.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'd take that.
So folks aren't lying when they say avoid Galaxy Fight at all costs.
Yeah. I actually was looking at prices for the Ragnar for the AES, and the only price I could find is it for $1,250.
Oh my God!
Holy
what a bath!
for an AES game. So
wow.
And that's
just to put it on your shelf, really, because I can't.
You ain't playing that. Like I don't know any sane person that would be like, you know what, looks like a good deal to me, but I can't even find any sold. That's the only one I could find. Like on eBay, I can't even find a sold listing.
That thing is not.
I think
coming
it's just
down
that
from
rare
the
of a game. Yeah, that thing's staying on the shelf. That's like one of those. I got this.
I got this. I guess.
For completion's sake.
It's one of the only ones I could afford because all the other ones are actually. That's the thing is it's probably one of the cheaper games, and that just tells you everything you need to know about AES.
I do think that this plays a bit better than Galaxy. I think Galaxy Force plays better than this. It's just Galaxy Force's obnoxious difficulty.
Galaxy Fight
chucked it down, but I think
Galaxy
Fight,
agree with that. Yeah.
I think it plays better, but it's the CPU makes it miserable. I think if you've got someone to play with Galaxy Fight, it's it's not so bad.
I was gonna say Galaxy Force plays light years better.
Yeah, no, so Galaxy Force it's a brilliant game, superb game. But Galaxy Fight, I think it at a base level it plays better than Ragnarok, Shinuken, but it's even though it's a little bit easier to make it your way through arcade mode on Ragnarok, it's just a miserable time.
Yeah, but who could you talk to play into this? Like, be like, hey, want to come over and play Ragnarok? It's like, yeah, well, let me go over there right now.
Yeah. That's pretty much everything on the list. One honorable mention I will say is Sonic Wings Special, which is kind of like a comp, or I don't know. It's like it's a
compilation
of Aero Fighters 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, so that does that count? Would we count that as Neo Geo on Saturn? Sonic Wings Special. It feels like Neo Geo-ish. Yeah, so I figured mention that too. We already mentioned In the Hunt. Hebereki's Popoito, I put that on the list. It's one in a series of games that were on Neo Geo, but I don't think that one was, but that's another puzzle game. Kind of like Dr. Mario. But yeah, that's it. We made it through the entire list of it. Question: what should folks be playing these games with? You got anybody for pad or anybody for like arcade stick? And if so, what arcade stick?
Sorry,
I'll let you go, Mel.
I was just gonna say it really is down to preference, honestly. The Saturn pad is so good with fighters. It's one of the few systems where I will say you can use a pad and you will be okay. Because the pad is that good. I mean, it's true. There are some things you can do with a stick that a pad just won't pull off. But I would say for 95% of people, the Saturn pad is such a good 2D pad. You're going to be fine with the regular controller. Now, if you're born and bred, arcade, this is the way I play, this is how I want to play, of course, you're going to want a stick. And if you're going to go that route, I would go ahead and pick up one of the Bluetooth adapters for the Saturn and go with one of the modern arcade sticks that you can grab. The big problem with messing around with the original, accessories and peripherals for the Saturn is you just don't know the condition of it. A lot of times when you order an arcade stick from that era, it's been beat to hell. The buttons are in bad shape, the stick's in bad shape, the micro switches are in bad shape, and you have to take the time to bring that up to where you want it to be. Whereas if you just grab a Bluetooth adapter and use something, more modern, you're better off in the long run, in my opinion.
Yeah, you can literally just go on OfferUp, type in arcade fight stick, and you can buy like a cheap of the Xbox 360 or PS3 ones for $20 to $40, and literally it's like a Sanwa, like a competitive grade Sanwa joystick and buttons. And if you don't like that, you can swap the buttons out for something else because they're all universal. Yeah. So
plus, if you're trying to use like a Virtua stick, like one of the Virtua sticks, the layout's different than what you would get from like a Neo Geo layout, right?
Yeah, for most of them, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, with the Saturn ports, you also would get additional things like L and R would do like button combinations that you could choose in the option screen and whatnot. But I mean, if you absolutely want it to go with original, that Virtua stick is great. Hori makes a great arcade stick for the Saturn. You could look for that one, and that one tends to be cheap too.
Yeah.
That one's I got like for $20 at PRGE, Dave, right?
Yeah, it was pretty good condition. I mean, we tested it out. It worked pretty well. The more expensive Virtua sticks, those things are built like bulletproof almost. Like they're basically like they took them out of the arcade. Especially the double wide one that's like a part of a candy cap. Those ones will take a beating, but Mel is right. Like if they were involved in any kind of competitive play, then they've probably taken a few licks and then they're like fixer uppers. Which I don't know.
Plus, a lot of buttons actually aren't like even arcade grade. They're cheaper ones. Like if you want to replace the buttons, you have to like Dremel out a hole for that. It's like a bit smaller. So And even like the stick, it's a Samitsu, but it can either be that or a really bad ASCII one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a gamble on that. So yeah, definitely just go get like the Wingman or just some adapter and just do that.
It is personal preference, but I would say like when it comes to the King of Fighters games, I prefer a fight stick. When it comes to something like Metal Slug, I don't mind playing with a gamepad, you know. But yeah, like definitely, just the half turn and quarter turns and just how quickly you can. I don't know, like using your thumb is just never going to be as fast as having all 4 fingers on the buttons, you know, and being able to just, you get a much better tactile feel from a fight stick when you're playing a fighting game. But
plus my thumb hurts a lot doing the combos on there versus the stick where it's just my wrist.
Exactly. So yeah, if again, the bulk of these games we talked about were fighting games. So folks might just want to consider it. If they want to like enhance their experience and kind of bring that more of that arcade home, you know, in terms of emulating the arcade experience. But like Mel said, Saturn Pad is just about as good as it gets when it comes to just about everything mid 90s gaming, you know. So, and the 6-button layout is perfect. So it'll definitely get you most of the way. Well, anyway, that was awesome. We went a little over. Yeah, we went like 2.5 hours. That's more than I thought we would have to talk about Neo Geo stuff. But
well, it was a big overview of it, so we had a lot to say.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. It was a pretty big overview. It's like 21 games, but you know, I think we gave each game some thought and consideration, minus like Stakes Winner, which we didn't have much to say.
If you like horses, play the game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, really,
you can read Japanese.
What's funny is that's just like scratching the surface of like Neo Geo games and good Neo Geo games. There's just so many. I highly recommend folks try playing other Neo Geo games because it's an excellent console. It's way up there in terms of quality and just overall experience. Up there with stuff like the Dreamcast, in my opinion, and the Sega Saturn, of course. So, you know, but I mean, if you're on a budget and you only got a Saturn and you want to play some Neo Geo on the Saturn, these are the 21 games that and a few honorable mentions that you can check out on Saturn. And I appreciate every one of you guys joining me here. It's been way too long, and just appreciate having your company and being able to chat with you guys. Neo Geo.
Been a pleasure, as always.
Yep, thank you.
Great.
And until next time, this has been SaturnDave from Sega Saturn SHIRO, and Dan from Sega Guys, TraynoCo, Pat from SHIRO as well, and Mel, Sega Lord X, reminding you that you must play Sega Saturn.
You must. And play Neo Geo too.
And play Neo Geo on the Saturn, or Lord Sagata will find you in your sleep and make you pay.
He'll make you play Stakes Winner and Galaxy.
Make you play Galaxy Fight and Ragnargard. We'll catch you later. See ya. Sega Saturn SHIRO